Chapter 1275. After Hua Yuan said this, Niesun's face showed exhaustion. His eyes were half closed, covering the strange emotion that surged in his eyes. Neither of them spoke again. The air was almost stagnant, and a strange atmosphere filled the air as if they were having a silent contest. This student admires military advisor Nie very much. I am indignant when I heard what happened to military advisor. After a while, Hua Yuan suddenly smiled and said, hearing about him is not as good as meeting him in person. Military advisor is still thinking about the Lord and his family when his life is in danger. Such noble character is truly a role model for us. Nie Sun's expression was calm as he said, Sun is but a nobody. I'm not worthy of such praise. Hua Yuan smiled and took a few steps forward as if they were familiar with each other. He sat directly beside Nie Sun's bed. The two were only a few steps away from each other. He lowered his voice and said, if military advisor is also considered a nobody, how many talents in the world would be ashamed? Nie Sun ignored him and continued to lie on his back. His eyes stared upwards with an empty gaze. Hua Yuan continued, I admit that I'm inferior to the military advisor's ability to scheme against others. Nie Sun's gaze moved. His expression did not change, but killing intent surged in his heart. What scheming? I heard that military advisor in general are in conflict and have been at odds for a long time. Hua Yuan said, General ignored military advisor's advice and insisted on using troops against the enemy. In the end, he lost more than 10,000 soldiers and horses. You didn't reflect on your actions and used a saber on the military counselor, almost causing him to lose his life. If these two incidents were to reach the Lord's ears, the general would be demoted and stripped of his power. If it were to be serious, he would be punished by military law. Nie Sun had mentioned Hua Yuan's suggestions to Yuan Xin, but Yuan Xin did not believe the latter, but the former. How could Yuan Xin easily believe the words of a temporary worker? It was only because the time and place were different and the person speaking was different. Firstly, when Nie Sun advised Yuan Xin had not suffered a setback. Instead, he was calm, content, and confident. Secondly, Nie Sun and Yuan Xin's relationship that had improved with great difficulty deteriorated again. This made Yuan Xin feel even more disgusted and suspicious of Nie Sun, which led to rebellious thoughts. Nie Sun was also tricked by Feng Jin, which made Yuan Xin highly suspicious of the value of Nie Sun's suggestions. When it was Hua Yuan's turn, Yuan Xin was already hopping around anxiously. On the surface, he still looked so conceited, but in his heart, he was extremely anxious. He urgently needed victory and merit to make up for his previous mistakes and losses. He also needed to ask his lord to forgive him for accidentally injuring Nie Sun. If Yuan Xin had performed a meritorious service, then Huang Song would not pursue the matter on account of his meritorious service and would not be able to support Nie Sun. Taking 10,000 steps back, even if Yuan Xin supported Nie Sun, Yuan Xin could escape the death penalty. At most, he would be demoted and lose his salary. Apart from that, Yuan Xin did not think that a poor scholar would be able to scheme against him, so he reluctantly used Hua Yuan's suggestion. The general knows the pros and cons of this. If he wants to avoid censure, he can only make up for his mistakes with his meritorious service. Before that, he won't let you know what he's done. Hua Yuan smiled and said, the military counselor is well aware of this, so he chose this time to write a will to his wife and daughter, asking them to seek refuge with the Yu family in Wanzhou. Because not only will the general not tell the Lord about the will, but he will also help the military counselor conceal it. If Huang Song knew that Nie Sun had written a will to his wife, wouldn't Yuan Xin be confessing without being pressed? As long as they avoided Huang Song, Yuan Xin would turn a blind eye because of his guilty conscience, and Nie Sun's wife and daughter would be able to leave this place safely. From the beginning to the end, Nie Sun had schemed against Yuan Xin. Yuan Xin had unknowingly become a knife in Nie Sun's hands. Hua Yuan asked with a smile, I heard that the military counselor was on the verge of death several times. How can I not admire him for being able to scheme so accurately under such circumstances? Substantial killing intent flashed in Yesun's eyes, but his tone of voice was very calm and indifferent. I don't understand what you're talking about. Sending away my wife and daughter and planning for the rest of their lives is just the instinct and duty of a husband and father. The corners of Yesun's lips curled into a bitter smile. I don't even know if I can survive such an injury. Naturally, I have to plan for the worst. Hua Yuan said, to be precise, it should be a double plan, right? Yesun's hand that was placed by his side suddenly clenched, almost tearing at the healing wound. If the military counselor unfortunately dies, your wife and daughter will naturally be safe for the rest of their lives with the protection of the Yu family. If the military advisor is lucky enough to survive, and send them away. Hua Yuan grinned as he looked at Yesun. His pitch-black eyes caused one to shudder, and they were like a deep and icy cold pool. The military advisor will have nothing to worry about anymore. In my opinion, the military counselor is not a kind person. Will he really be able to take this lying down? The literati of this era had nothing else but tough bones, bad tempers, arrogant personalities, and fierce actions. Buddhist? No way. Even if Wei Ci and Feng Jin, who were known to have good tempers, looked modest, polite, and gentle on the surface, if they really crossed their bottom line, no one would be easy to deal with. Even if Yesun looked harmless, Hua Yuan's sharp senses could smell the hidden danger under the calm surface. This matter between Yesun and Yuan Xin would not be resolved peacefully. Sun and General Yuan Xin are both under the Lord's command. There are occasional conflicts, but it's not a big deal. Yesun turned to look at Hua Yuan and asked with a faint smile, do you think that Sun will ignore the big picture and cause a scandal of civil and military infighting to embarrass the Lord? Hua Yuan was stunned after hearing this, as if he did not expect Yesun to answer like this. Did his words mean that he would take this lying down and not care about Yuan Xin's mistakes? Although Sun and General Yuan Xin have conflicts, it is not fair and just for the Lord to judge. No matter how wrong the general is, only the Lord can convict him. Yesun said calmly, my wife and daughter seeking refuge with the Yu family will indeed attract criticism at this time. When Sun's health is better and the war situation is settled, I will think of a way to bring them back. I already have a plan for this matter. You don't have to worry about it. Speaking of this, Yesun's tone was slightly unfriendly, as if he was very dissatisfied with Hua Yuan's provocation. To put it bluntly, Yesun did not know Hua Yuan at all. He did not even know the other's name or courtesy name. Hua Yuan's random guesses and meddling in other people's affairs would also make others angry. Hua Yuan's expression changed, and he hurriedly bowed in apology. I was reckless and impulsive. Please forgive me, military counselor. The corners of his mouth curled up, but there was no trace of a smile in his eyes. Yesun closed his eyes slightly and calmly asked him to leave. Hua Yuan obediently retreated. After he left, Yesun looked like he was struggling. He was deciding whether he should take Hua Yuan's life or not. There was no lack of smart people in the world, but smart people who could not control their mouths usually did not live long. Not long after, Yuan Xin knew that Hua Yuan had gone to see Yesun. He asked in a seemingly casual manner, why did you go to see him? Hua Yuan said, there are some things that I did not understand, so I went to consult the military counselor. That person is just an empty shell. He is not even as good as a poor scholar like you. Yuan Xin curled his lips and said, how is his recovery? Hua Yuan thought for a while. The military doctor was probably Yuan Xin's man, and Yesun's physical condition could not be hidden from Yuan Xin. Hence, Hua Yuan said, the military counselor's complexion is pale, but he seems to be in good spirits. Chapter 1276. When Yuan Xin acted, he really wanted Yesun to die. After calming down for so many days, he was actually glad that the other party was still alive. If Yesun died, this matter would be stuck in Lord's heart for the rest of her life. Yuan Xin would not be able to be put in an important position in the future. Not only that, it might even implicate the descendants of Yuan Xin's bloodline. With this thought in mind, when Yuan Xin learned that Yesun was gradually getting out of danger and that his wounds were starting to heal, He turned a blind eye and did not ask the military doctor to do anything. In the future, there would be many opportunities to find trouble with Nye-sun. There was no need to rush. Yuan Xion's tiger eyes seemed to shine as he asked, "What else did you talk about?" Hua Yuan smiled and said, "I tried to ask for guidance for a while, but the military advisor's energy is not enough. I can only take my leave regrettably." Yuan Xian curled his lips in disdain and said mockingly, "He's quite refined. He only took a knife and made himself look like a woman within a month." What was within the moon? If Yuan Xian's words were heard by Nye-sun, wouldn't he go crazy with anger? Hua Yuan listened quietly at the side with a faint smile on his face. His presence was so low that it was like a wall in the background. Yuan Xian could not be bothered to mention Nye-sun anymore. He was more worried about the situation at the front line. He followed Hua Yuan's instructions, but the results were minimal. The bait was set, but the big fish refused to take the bait. When Hua Yuan heard about this, he asked in surprise, "Who is the enemy general? Why is he so cautious and difficult to deal with?" Yuan Xin said in distress, "This general doesn't know either. The scouts didn't find anything either. All they know is that it's a young, unfamiliar general. He did not meet Jiang Pengji face to face. The scouts who went out to investigate did not know what Jiang Pengji looked like. Jiang Pengji was always dressed as a man in the army. Most of the time, she wore a heavy military uniform and armor. She wore a helmet that covered both sides of her face. People who were not familiar with her could easily mistake her gender. Everyone in the world knew that the Duchess of Lanting was the only female vassal, so it was impossible to link it to her. Because of the mismatch in information, no one had discovered that the seriously ill Jiang Pengji had been wandering in the rear of Qinzhou for almost a month. Hua Yuan shook his head. If it was a young general, it was even more impossible. Yuan Xian asked, "What's wrong with that?" Hua Yuan said, "General, put yourself in their shoes and think about it. If you were their general, would you follow up with a successful pursuit or retreat?" Yuan Xian was stunned for a moment, then said decisively, "Of course it's to retreat in the face of danger." Because of the omniscient view, Yuan Xian knew that it was a trap to strengthen the defense and clear the field. Of course, he would not say that he would foolishly follow up on his victory. Hua Yuan continued, "If you don't know anything, the advantage lies with you. You only need to follow the prescribed order and pursue the enemy, and you'll be able to increase the results of the battle by several times." In the face of such a huge temptation, will the general really give up the heavenly merit that is within easy reach at this critical moment? Yuan Xian blushed and said reluctantly, "Of course I'm unwilling. No one would remain unmoved in the face of benefits that were easily obtainable." Hua Yuan added, "Even a general is like this, let alone an unknown young general. Young generals admittedly had their merits, but they also had many shortcomings, such as eagerness for quick success and instant benefits, instability, lack of experience, and so on. Yuan Xian's character were flawed, but his combat experience was unquestionable. Otherwise, Huangsong would not have given him so many opportunities. Even Yuan Xian would take the risk, let alone an impatient and immature young general and an unfamiliar young general. An unfamiliar face meant that he was not famous, and a young general meant that he was young and inexperienced. Logically speaking, this person's desire to achieve success was stronger than that of a normal general. But in the end, in the face of temptation, he was not moved, and he retreated in the face of danger without lingering to fight. How was he like a young and inexperienced fledgling? Yuan Xian regained his composure and said, "According to what you're saying, the commanding general is someone else?" Hua Yuan's expression was solemn as he said, "The general is experienced and knowledgeable. Who do you think this style resembles?" Yuan Xian thought carefully under Hua Yuan's reminder. As he thought, he said, "There are only a few famous generals under Lu Shi. Each of them has their own temperament, and the way they do things are very different. This decisive style, it's not easy to guess. Perhaps with a new face." Although he did not want to admit it, Lu Shi was already a feudal lord who dominated more than half of Dongqing and the northern borderline. Even if she was a woman, she could bring benefits. As long as there were benefits to be gained, there would naturally be people who would rush to join her. It was not unusual for a new face to join her camp. Yuan Xian said, "Why? You don't agree?" Hua Yuan smiled bitterly and said, "I am indeed a little narrow-minded. Do you think this style is like the Lord of Lanting himself?" Yuan Xian was so shocked that he almost bit his tongue. What did he hear? Lushi? Yuan Xian shook his head and said, "Impossible, impossible. Lushi was seriously ill because of her grandmother's death. I heard that she almost lost her life. Why would she risk her life to come to Qinzhou? If she came to Qinzhou, who would be guarding the front line? This speculation is too absurd and ridiculous." According to a normal person's thinking, Yuan Xian's words were not wrong. Jiang Pengji was out of her mind, but the people under her command should have brains. How could they allow their lord to leave the front line and enter the enemy's rear? Hua Yuan saw Yuan Xian's confident expression and smiled embarrassedly. "You're right, counselor. I was thinking too much." Although there was no evidence, Hua Yuan still felt that it was Jiang Pengji. He had studied the few battles that Jiang Pengji had led. Her distinct personal style left a deep impression. She had shown her decisive side since the first battle against the Tsing Yi army. She was always so sober and calm, as if she was standing on the sidelines from the beginning to the end. Would such a sober person really disregard the overall situation and risk running to the enemy's rear? Yuan Xian said, "If the enemy doesn't take the bait, think of another way." Hua Yuan came back to his senses and said with a smile, "I have a plan here. Counselor, please listen." The two of them talked in low voices. Yuan Xian's eyes became brighter and brighter. Jiang Pengji sneezed loudly and rubbed her nose. "I'm afraid Zixiao misses me." Yang Si was speechless. "My lord, look down. That's because you're embarrassing yourself." I wonder how Hua Yu's preparations are going. Jiang Pengji planned to retreat after having enough fun. She had disturbed the peace in Qinzhou. Huang Song's head would probably hurt if he heard the news. To prevent the enemy from suddenly becoming smart and running to fight a war of attrition, Jiang Pengji asked Feng Jin to be ready to support her. As long as they crossed the gorge, the army would be safe. Yang Si said, "The news has been spread. Hua Yu will make the appropriate arrangements." Jiang Pengji was about to nod when she heard the sound of horse hooves. She saw two teams of scouts rushing back to the army. Report: traces of an ambush have been found ahead. Ambush? Jiang Pengji frowned deeply and said unhappily, "It's not easy to fight on other people's home ground. They always set up ambushes. If they accidentally stepped into a trap, Jiang Pengji would lose a lot of troops." Yang Si asked the scout, "How many ambushes have you found out?" The scout said, "According to the traces, there are about 10,000 of them." More than 10,000 ambushes? So much effort? If the ambush gained the upper hand, even if Jiang Pengji's side was vigilant, they would lose nearly 10,000 troops if they really fought. Seeing that they were about to leave Qinzhou, Jiang Pengji did not want to increase the number of casualties. She turned her head and asked Yang Si, "Can we go around them?" Yang Si was from Dingjun in Qinzhou. He was very familiar with the terrain. Otherwise, Jiang Pengji would not have dragged him here. Chapter 1277. Let's take a detour if we can. It's good to have fewer casualties. Jiang Pengji quickly made a decision. It was better to do this sooner rather than later. The longer they delayed, the more their food supply would be. Yang Si nodded in agreement. It was fine not to know that there was an enemy ambush ahead, but if they knew and still foolishly went forward, wouldn't they be looking for trouble? After all, he was a native of Qinzhou. Yang Si was still very familiar with his hometown. Even if they took a detour, it would not waste too much time. Jiang Pengji looked at the sky and muttered, "The army will rest in place for an hour. The vanguard scouts will go forward to explore the way." Although it was said to rest in place, the entire army still maintained a defensive formation to prevent the enemy from suddenly rushing out. Jiang Pengji turned over and dismounted. Little White followed behind her obediently. Seeing this, Yang Si also dismounted to rest. "Why are you frowning, my lord?" Yang Si drank a mouthful of water to moisten his throat. After spring, it was gradually summer. The weather was getting hotter and hotter. After marching for 2 to 4 hours, one would be sweating profusely. In serious cases, one would even feel that their throats were smoking. "Is there something wrong?" Jiang Pengji said. "I just feel a little strange." "Strange? What's strange?" Yang Si said excitedly. "My lord, why don't you tell me and let me analyze it for you? Maybe I can help you solve your doubts." She shook her head and said, "I can't say what's strange. I just feel a little uncomfortable in my heart." Yang Si was in a dilemma. How should he analyze it? "Then, can you tell me what makes you uncomfortable?" Yang Si guided her. "What?" Jiang Pingji thought about it and said, "By the way, the ambush that the scouts mentioned just now doesn't feel right." Jiang Pingji had always believed in her intuition, which was a keen sense of danger. It had helped her escape from death several times. Although Jiang Pingji had been in this era for many years, she was more familiar with the way and thinking of war in the interstellar era. Occasionally, she would be confused. Yang Si took the initiative to help her solve her doubts, so she said it readily. Maybe he could give her useful advice. Yang Si said, "The ambush just now? My lord, do you think the ambush is a trap?" Jiang Pingji said, "The scouts judged the enemy situation based on the marching traces. Aren't the traces left by more than 10,000 troops too obvious?" As she spoke, her thoughts became more and more clear. An ambush with more than 10,000 soldiers is already considered a big move. Even our scouts were able to discover the obvious traces on the ground. The enemy wouldn't fall for it so easily. Are the Yuan Shin collective blind to not see it? That's right. What? When Jiang Pingji said that, she suddenly felt that there was some kind of conspiracy, and it was a targeted conspiracy. If it's an ambush, to prevent the enemy from being vigilant, it's natural to erase the traces of the army as much as possible, so that the enemy can enter the ambush site unprepared. Yang Si also pondered along this path. The more he thought about it, the more he felt that something was wrong, and his heart was filled with doubts. My lord's suspicions are correct. The enemy tried to ambush us, but left such an obvious flaw. This move is really suspicious. After a while, Yang Si suddenly thought of what Jiang Pengji had just said. He said, "Just now, the scouts reported that there were more than 10,000 soldiers lying in ambush in front of us. My lord said, if we could take a detour, then we should. It's good to have fewer casualties." Looking at it now, this ambush seemed to be specifically targeted at the Lord. Because the Lord was naturally vigilant, once she knew that there was an ambush ahead, she would definitely choose to take a detour. Could it be that the ambush ahead was fake and the real ambush was on the path we took to take a detour? Jiang Pengji shook her head. "It's hard to say. The only thing I'm sure of is that there's indeed an ambush ahead." Although the live stream was useless except for chatting, Jiang Pengji was a person who was good at making use of others. She would try her best to use all resources to achieve her goals. The camera in the live stream could overlook the ground from a certain height. After Jiang Pengji adjusted the angle of the camera in the live stream, she did indeed discover many ambushes. In other words, if Jiang Pengji did not take a detour, she would still be ambushed. Yang Si was puzzled after hearing this. What was going on? Looking at it now, it was not a good idea to take a detour, but it was also not a good idea to not take a detour. It made people panic. What is that boorish man Yuan Xian up to? Jiang Pengji said, "It's impossible for Yuan Xian to do this. He doesn't have the brains to think about such complicated things. This doesn't seem like Nie Sun's style either. I dare not say that I understand Nie Sun very well, but things like style are personal characteristics. Nie Sun's style is not like this. Didn't Nie Sun get slashed by Yuan Xian and almost lose his life? Scholars have always been proud and unyielding. Nie Sun dislikes Yuan Xian, so he probably won't give him advice despite his illness," Yang Si said. "There are many talents under Yuan Xian's banner. It's hard to say which one of them made a move." Jiang Pengji smiled and said, "I have a hunch that this person is coming for me." Yang Si also said that the ambush seemed to be aimed at her, or it could be said that it was aimed at her cautious and thorough character. In order not to increase the number of casualties, Jiang Pengji would definitely choose to take a detour when she knew that there was an ambush. As they were talking, the scouts in the vanguard rushed back one after another. The situation along the way was good, and it was suitable for marching. Jiang Pengji said, "We've rested enough. Let's continue on our way." Because of their suspicions, Jiang Pengji and the others were especially careful when marching. The whole army was always in a state of facing the enemy. Yang Si looked around at the surroundings and said, "The terrain here is open. It's not suitable for an ambush. We should be safe." Jiang Pengji nodded and looked back at the army that was still orderly. She could not help but frown. Everyone has worked hard for the day. Let's rest here for the night. We'll continue marching tomorrow. There was a water source nearby. It was convenient for the cooks to wash the rice, set up a fire to cook, and replenish their water pouches. The viewers in the live stream room also tensed up. When they heard that she was going to rest, they hurriedly reminded her to pay attention to the water source. That was natural. Jiang Pengji was very cautious about what she drank. She was only willing to drink drinking water after it was boiled. During ancient wars, there were many examples of enemies poisoning upstream. Jiang Pengji naturally would not make such a low-level mistake. After a round of inspection, the water source was normal. Upon reaching this conclusion, Jiang Pengji did not breathe a sigh of relief. Instead, she frowned even more. The next day, the army found traces of what seemed to be an ambush in front of them. "Can we take a detour?" Jiang Pengji asked again. Yang Si frowned and said, "Yes, but the army has to turn around and march 3 to 5 miles. The journey will be half a day later than expected." The army's journey was calculated. If they exceeded this time, they would face the pressure of a shortage of military rations. Jiang Pengji said, "Take a detour." Yang Si hurriedly said, "But my lord," Jiang Pengji said, "I want to know what the other party is up to. I've seen some clues. It's only half a day. It's not a big deal." Helpless, Yang Si could only comply. A strange and tense atmosphere pervaded the whole army. The officers and soldiers did not understand why they had to take a detour several times. Chapter 1278. Sure enough, one day after the second detour, they ran into another ambush. Yang Si's eyes were filled with astonishment as he suddenly understood. "Your Highness, Yuan Xin is trying to drag us to death." The longer they marched, the more rations they consumed. If they couldn't meet up with Feng Jin and the others before their rations ran out, a total of 50,000 soldiers might really be killed here by someone's scheme. At the thought of that possibility, Yang Si felt both relieved and scared. It's not as simple as delaying time. Didn't you notice that the soldiers' energy is also depleted very quickly? Jiang Pengji said, "Because there's an ambush, the soldiers have to raise their spirits to deal with it. It's fine if it's only for a short while, but if it's like this for a few days in a row, he won't have enough energy and his combat strength will definitely drop." His spirit wasn't good, and he was hungry. How much of his battle prowess could he display? Yang Si said, "My lord, what should we do now?" Jiang Pengji retorted, "What do you think?" Yang Si said, "Instead of being so timid, why don't we go all out and kill our way out? We can't lose the bigger picture because of a small gain." Yang Si would really vomit blood if he lost 50,000 troops and a lord because he was afraid of losing a few thousand troops. Jiang Pengji sneered as she unsheathed the god-slaying sword from her waist. The shiny blade shone with a piercing white light under the reflection of the sun. What a coincidence! I was thinking the same thing. Jiang Pengji had never been a person who was afraid of battles. She was cautious by nature, but that did not mean that she was timid and would not lose sight of the bigger picture. After being schemed against like this, if she didn't take revenge, she would really be looked down upon. Continue advancing. If they continued to fight like this, their morale, combat strength, and the energy of their soldiers would be greatly reduced. At that time, they wouldn't have the strength to fight even if they wanted to. It's like boiling a frog in warm water. Jiang Pengji said, "The other party took advantage of the fact that I didn't want to increase the number of casualties and designed the so-called ambush. They made us take a detour unknowingly and did useless work. If I had chosen to avoid the battle for this reason, I would have fallen into the enemy's trap. It was a good idea to slowly whittle down their forces bit by bit. Moreover, the rations along the way had already been cleared by the enemy. We don't have any supplies, and we're in a desperate situation. We can only wait for death. I'd like to meet the person who came up with the idea. Yang Si shook his head. Judging from the layout, he has a good understanding of the situation in Chenzhou and the speed of our army's march. If he doesn't understand it, any mistake in any part of the process would be useless. If Jiang Pengji's marching speed was faster than expected, and they happened to bump into Jiang Pengji's army when they were preparing to set up an ambush, they would be courting death. If Jiang Pengji's marching speed was slower than expected, the current effect would not be achieved. Only by calculating everything perfectly could one press on step by step and force the enemy to run for their lives. Jiang Pengji sneered. No matter how good the idea is, once it's seen through, it's worthless. She's afraid of ambushes? Of course she was not afraid. So what if there was an ambush? Not to mention 10,000 ambushing soldiers. Even 50,000 ambushing soldiers would not be able to stop all of her troops. If the target was wary, the effectiveness of the ambush would be greatly reduced. A smile appeared at the corner of Yang Si's lips. He really liked to see his lord's confident expression. No one wanted to follow a timid, weak, and incompetent lord. It was so frustrating to be a subordinate. According to Hua Yuan's calculations, Jiang Pengji should endure for a while more before exploding. She had stepped into the trap that he had set up, which was extremely suitable for an ambush. Unexpectedly, her temper was more irritable than Hua Yuan had imagined. She could not hold it in any longer. She could not bear it anymore. There was no need to bear it anymore. Faced with Jiang Pengji's unconventional actions, Yuan Xin was the first to be dumbfounded. Because Hua Yuan had calculated correctly twice, Yuan Xin was not so concerned about the ambush this time. Would Jiang Pengji be lured away by a casual gesture? No matter how perfect the ambush was, wouldn't it be a waste? Unexpectedly, Jiang Pengji rushed over with her troops, causing Yuan Xin to be flustered. Jiang Pengji had always been a decisive person. She did things cleanly and efficiently without procrastinating. Since she had made up her mind to force her way through, of course, she would not give the enemy time to prepare mentally. Yuan Xin was furious. The blue veins on his forehead bulged from the force of his jaw. These literati are really not trustworthy at all. Hua Yuan's calculations were wrong. Yuan Xin was forced into a passive position. He was the one who ambushed, but now it was as if he had been ambushed by Jiang Pengji. Yuan Xin was arrogant and conceited. Of course, he would not look for the reason for his failure from himself. Instead, he looked for Hua Yuan's fault. After all, Hua Yuan was only a temporary worker without an official position. He came from a humble background. His life was equivalent to that of an ant in Yuan Xin's eyes. Did Yuan Xin have to admit that it was not the temporary worker's fault, but his? Seeing that the enemy's army was getting closer and closer, Yuan Xin's side could only choose to fight hastily. Because Jiang Pengji had discovered it early and Yuan Xin's side was not fully prepared, the so-called ambush did not achieve the desired effect. Even so, Yuan Xin still caused a certain number of casualties on Jiang Pengji's side. Compared to the losses suffered in a proper ambush, this number of casualties was still within an acceptable range. Seeing that the scale of the battle was tilting towards Jiang Pengji's side, Yuan Xin could only stop his losses in time. He retreated angrily, leaving 3,000 to 4,000 corpses behind. This battle was unexpectedly easy to fight. Jiang Pengji shook her head. It's really infuriating to meet a general like Yuan Xin. According to the footage captured by the camera in the streaming room, the previous two ambushes had taken a lot of effort. If Jiang Pengji had really charged in, she would have lost at least 5,000 troops and horses. However, the two arrangements were not put to use. Yuan Xin's side slacked off and planned to simply fool people. Unexpectedly, Jiang Pengji did not play by the rules this time. Not only did she not choose to take a detour, but she also led her troops to attack. How could a shoddy construction withstand Jiang Pengji's violent destruction? Yang Si wiped the blood off his face with a handkerchief. As he tidied up his appearance, he said, "My heart aches for Nyesun." Jiang Pengji said, "Yuan Xian has reminded me that the military reform should be brought forward. If a general tampered with military orders and strategies because of his own selfishness, or if he responded perfunctorily, Yuan Xian was a good example. The commander-in-chief had sole authority in the military. It was fine if he met a reliable one, but if he was unreliable, Jiang Pengji could not help but frown. She did not have many generals under her command. Other than a few who were highly valued, the new people who were promoted later on were still inexperienced and could not take charge independently. Inexperience meant that they had little experience and were easy to be schemed against. Of course, it was better to politely decline a veteran general like Yuan Xian who took advantage of his seniority, who was conceited, confident, and arrogant. Of course, Yang Si knew about the military reform. His lord had mentioned it several times, but because the time was not ripe, she did not put it into action. Military reform? My lord, you'll take action when you return? Jiang Pengji shook her head. I'll take action after I defeat Bogeo. The impact of the military reform now is too great. She wanted to restrict the commander-in-chief's military power and command. She did not want to see Yuan Xian appear under her command. Chapter 1279. Yuan Xian returned pathetically and immediately sent someone to question Hua Yuan. In the end, General, he's gone. Yuan Xian was waiting for Hua Yuan. He never expected to hear this answer. Hua Yuan was gone. Gone? How could he be gone? Look everywhere. I want to see him alive or dead. Yuan Xian frowned. He had a belly full of anger that had no outlet to vent. At this moment, he was angry and aggrieved, like an angry beast that had been injured. The soldier anxiously lowered his head and did not dare to be negligent. He quickly retreated to find Hua Yuan. Naturally, they could not find him because Hua Yuan had already left. You still haven't found him? Yuan Xian waited for a long time. The anger in his heart licked his liver. As time passed, the ominous feeling in his heart grew stronger. The soldier's heart trembled. Because of fear, his entire body trembled like a sieve. I haven't found him. I've searched everywhere, but I can't find any trace. It's as if he disappeared into thin air. Really disappeared? Yuan Xian slowly digested this news. His mind was in a mess. All kinds of conspiracy theories were competing in his mind. Why did Hua Yuan run away? Could it be that he was a spy sent by the enemy? On the surface, he was giving advice to him, but in reality, he was helping the thief escape? If that was the case, everything would make sense. Yuan Xian's livid face suddenly turned pale. Quickly search and see if anything is missing. Also, send out a notice to arrest Hua Yuan. The soldiers searched Hua Yuan's temporary residence. Yuan Xian also buried himself in checking his commander's seal and all kinds of documents. The result was confusing. When Hua Yuan left, he did not take anything valuable with him. He did not even take his newly tailored clothes with him. Yuan Xian did not lose his commander's seal, personal seal, documents. Not a single one was missing. They were all in their original places. If Hua Yuan was really a spy sent by the enemy, why did he not take these? Yuan Xian was confused and glad at the same time. He was confused by Hua Yuan's actions and glad that Hua Yuan did not take advantage of the situation. Could it be that he knew he was useless and was afraid that I would blame him? So he left first? Yuan Xian thought. He felt that this guess was the most likely. Although he was unhappy that Hua Yuan had escaped, compared to the worst situation, the current situation was already very good. Yuan Xian said angrily. He got off lightly. If he could capture Hua Yuan, he would definitely skin this fellow alive to vent the hatred in his heart. Where was Hua Yuan right now? The wheels of the carriage rolled forward, and Hua Yuan's soft humming could be faintly heard from the bumpy carriage. Huang Song's defeat is certain. I'm afraid he's no match for Lu Shi. Hua Yuan was still in his original shabby attire. His legs were crossed inelegantly, and his back was bent forward lazily. His body swayed along with the jolting ox cart. In the carriage, there was a young man about 11 or 12 years old. The young man was dressed in ordinary clothes, but he had an air of nobility about him. His features were elegant and handsome. Anyone who saw him would praise him as a good seedling, and his future could be seen. The youth asked in surprise, "Sir, are you so sure?" Hua Yuan sneered. According to Huang Song's plan, he handed Qinzhou over to Yuan Xin to give him the cold shoulder. The situation at the front line was critical, and Lu Shi was seriously ill. They only needed to stabilize the situation at the back. Yuan Xion's temperament wasn't that great, but he was an old general after all. He had a lot of experience, so he was still able to maintain his position. But Huang Song didn't expect Lu Shi to not only not be seriously ill, but also to bring troops to Qinzhou. Lu Shi brought troops. The youth's eyes widened in disbelief. He came to Qinzhou at this time. Qinzhou was Huang Song's rear. As the Lord, it was one thing for her to pretend to be sick, but how could she bring 50,000 troops deep into the enemy's territory? If they were to fail and Huang Song got a big bargain, he would laugh his head off in his dreams. Although there's no evidence, it's not far off. Hua Yuan said, "I wasn't sure at first, until I saw the news that Feng Jin was personally leading troops to guard both sides of the river. Think about it. With Feng Jin's background, if it weren't for Lu Shi, why would he need to be so energetic? Anyone else could have done the job of garrisoning troops on both sides of the gorge. In comparison, Sangzhou was more important to Feng Jin. And the result? Feng Jin didn't guard Sangzhou. Instead, he chose to stay at the front line of the river, where the security was tight. How could there be nothing fishy about it? The person who led 50,000 troops to create chaos in Qinzhou was more valuable than Sangzhou. Other than Feng Jin's lord, Lu Shi, who else could do it? It was precisely because Jiang Pengji was the one leading the troops that Hua Yuan was certain that Yuan Xin was no match for her. If Yuan Xin followed his plan, even if he couldn't seriously injure Jiang Pengji, he could at least kill half of her troops. But Hua Yuan thought about Yuan Xin's character and didn't think it was a good idea. After all, a dog can't change its habit. To avoid being implicated, he slipped away as soon as possible. Besides, he had already achieved his goal, so there was no need to waste time on Yuan Xin. Because of Lu Shi, having Yuan Xin guard the rear was the biggest mistake. Lu Shi is very cunning. How could he miss such a good opportunity? Hua Yuan turned to the youth and analyzed patiently. Even if Yuan Xin didn't die at Lu Shi's hands, he won't live for long. The youth asked why. Hua Yuan said, "Niesun wants to kill Yuan Xin and will take action in a few days." Yuan Xin can escape from the knife outside, but can he defend against his own people? Even if Niesun's performance was flawless, Hua Yuan still saw a familiar look in his eyes. It was a deep hatred for the enemy. Hua Yuan understood that look all too well. Niesun was not a bodhisattva who bemoaned the state of the universe and pitted the fate of mankind. He would not easily forgive Yuan Xin. As long as he found an opportunity, Niesun would set up a trap to take Yuan Xin's life. The youth lowered his head and thought for a long time before saying, "The situation in Dongqing looks much simpler than in Nansheng, but if we look deeper, the waters are deeper." Hua Yuan said, "When Huang Song's halberd sinks into the sand, it won't be just Dongqing that will be complicated. I'm afraid the entire 5 countries will be affected." The youth asked, "The 5 countries? Including Nansheng?" Hua Yuan said, "Including Nansheng." The youth revealed a trace of fear and said softly, "Teacher, I'm a little worried." Hua Yuan said, "The person who is worried about this is the Lord, not the young master." The youth said, "I am one with my father. What he is worried about is what I am worried about." This youth was the heir of Enchui. Because of the calamity of Nanman, Enchui's children died. After that, he went into exile in Dongqing and suffered a lot. His body was injured and it was difficult for him to have children. In desperation, he could only adopt the child of the same clan as his heir and make him the young master to reassure the people. Hua Yuan did not comment on the youth's words. After a while, the youth said, "With this batch of provisions, father will have nothing to worry about." Hua Yuan responded vaguely. On the other side, Niesun also received news of Hua Yuan's disappearance. He frowned and thought about his brief meeting and conversation with Hua Yuan. He had a vague feeling that something was wrong. He seemed to have overlooked something. Niesun called someone over and asked about Hua Yuan's movements in detail, as well as what advice he had given to Yuan Xin. After asking in detail, Niesun had to admit that Hua Yuan's strategy was not bad. Unfortunately, Yuan Xin, the useless teammate, was a hindrance. Fortify the defense and clear the field? He didn't listen to me no matter what I said, but he listened to Hua Yuan's advice. Niesun felt a little stifled. His desire to kill Yuan Xin grew stronger. Wait, repeat what you just said. Niesun's heart skipped a beat. Chapter 1280. Speaking of which, no one will believe that Hua Yuan didn't come to Dongqing from Nansheng to cheat Yuan Xan, Huang Song, or Jiang Pengji. He came with sincerity to borrow grain. Yes, he was right. Hua Yuan's purpose was to lobby the feudal lords and borrow some grain for his lord. The southern barbarians destroyed Nansheng. They also tried to establish a regime to rule over the remnant citizens of Nansheng. Unfortunately, their civilization was more barbaric than the northern borderline. They only knew how to destroy, but they didn't know how to appease the people or recuperate. When they lacked women, they robbed them. When they lacked food, they robbed them. When they lacked money, land, and manpower, they conquered them by force. The people of Nansheng suffered unspeakably. Various forces rose up to fight against the southern barbarians. However, fighting required grain. It would also delay the spring plowing. If the spring plowing was delayed, it meant that a year's harvest would be wasted. The grain shortage would become more severe, which would intensify the war. It was a terrifying, vicious cycle. The grain shortage in Nansheng grew larger. Many feudal lords had to live frugally, let alone the small feudal lords who weren't doing very well. And Shui had a firm foothold under Liu Zheng's plan. After annexing a few small feudal lords, his power began to expand. Capital was needed to expand power, and Shui's conditions were too weak. Sometimes, he had to seek sponsorship and support to tide them over temporarily. He had no choice but to borrow grain this time. If he couldn't borrow grain, it would be difficult for the people under his rule to survive until the next autumn harvest, let alone recruit soldiers to increase his power. What was borrowing? Temporarily using other people's property. Because of Nansheng's geographical location, they couldn't borrow grain from the southern barbarians. Zhongzhou was too far away. After much thought, they could only set their sights on Dongqing. Who knew that Dongqing would be turned upside down? Jiang Pengji and Huang Song, the plastic siblings, were at each other's throats. Neither of them looked like landlords with surplus grain. Even if they had surplus grain, they wouldn't give up easily. This was Hua Yuan's conclusion after studying their personalities. Jiang Pengji was shrewd and cunning. She wouldn't be at a disadvantage no matter what. Deceiving her was far more difficult than Hua Yuan had imagined. Ordinary people had to pay interest when they borrowed money, and scrupulous merchants paid interest when they borrowed money. In troubled times, grain was rarer than gold. It was easy to lend grain, but difficult to get it back. Jiang Pengji and Shui's friendship was limited to the cooperation of the Red Lotus Group and their brief meeting at the Huangshui meeting. How could he expect her to lend Shui a large batch of grain without interest? Before they arrived in Dongqing, Hua Yuan had some thoughts, but they were gone after that. Before Hua Yuan went out to borrow food, Liu Zheng, the chief strategist in Shui's tent, even gave him a sad poem. Huang Song might have a chance, but Liu Xi is out of the question, Liu Zheng said. When Jiang Pengji was studying in Langyi County, he and Jiang Pengji had interacted before. He knew very well how shrewd she was. The 1,000-year-old fox spirit could only be toyed with by her. Even if Hua Yuan was powerful, he would probably be defeated by her. Hua Yuan didn't know how difficult Jiang Pengji's strategy was. He said arrogantly, "How do you know it's impossible if you don't try?" She occupied 70% of the places that produced grain in Dongqing. It was said that she had managed her business well these past few years. She had fought several big battles in other people's territories. The land under her rule had always been prosperous, and she had stored a lot of grain. Speaking of which, Lu Shi is the one who doesn't have to worry about food during the Spring Festival. Not to mention the assets that Jiang Pengji had earned herself, the funds that Lu Shi had prepared for her were not small. Even if she hadn't reached out to Lu Shi, in the eyes of outsiders, the father and daughter were inseparable. The resources that Lu Shi had accumulated were all for his daughter. Lu Zheng shook his head. If you have the chance to see her, you'll know what kind of person she is. Hua Yuan said, you were friends with her when you were young. Why? Was she difficult to deal with in the past? She was very difficult. When she was studying in Langia, she was the devil that everyone avoided. If you borrowed grain from her, you'd be in a good mood if you paid 90%. If you were more ruthless, Lu Zheng paused at this point, and his expression became a little strange. Hua Yuan was speechless. 90% paid 13%. This was not much different from money from the government. The more Lu Zheng said this, the more curious Hua Yuan was about Jiang Pengji. After all, she was the first female lord in history who dared to fight for the world with the male lords. If a woman didn't have extraordinary abilities, how could she convince so many talents to willingly follow her orders? In the end, when Hua Yuan arrived in Dongqing, he found out that the two of them were locked in a fierce battle. Fighting a war was an activity that burned money and food. They didn't even have enough food, so how could they lend it to others? Even if Hua Yuan wanted to borrow money from the government, Huang Song and the others wouldn't let him go. Since he couldn't do it through proper channels, he could only think of a roundabout way to save the country. Hua Yuan carefully studied the entire situation of the war and keenly discovered that Chenzhou was profitable. He immediately rushed to Chenzhou. Yuan Xin and Nie Sun didn't get along. The former hurt the latter with a knife, and he was forced to jump up and down by Jiang Pengji's 50,000 troops. God is helping me. A plan quickly formed in his mind. Hua Yuan rubbed his hands excitedly. He knew how to get something without risking anything. Nie Sun and Yuan Xin didn't get along, and his life was in danger. The possibility of Hua Yuan's identity being exposed was minimized. Yuan Xin was arrogant and unruly. He refuted Nie Sun's suggestion and looked down on Hua Yuan at the same time. He was confident that Hua Yuan wouldn't dare to play tricks. Little did he know that Hua Yuan's ability to manipulate people's hearts was even better than Nie Sun's. He and Nie Sun both proposed to strengthen the defense and clear the field. The only difference was the final disposal of the grain. Nie Sun suggested to send the grain to the border of Haozhou. Not only could it prevent Jiang Pengji from feeding her troops, but could also support Huang Song's troops at the front line. If Jiang Pengji had no choice but to retreat, the grain could also be transported back to Chenzhou at the fastest speed to appease the people. Hua Yuan's suggestion was completely different. He suggested that Yuan Xin send the grain to the south of Chenzhou, because the south was the rear. The reason he gave was also very convincing. He used the grain as bait to lure Jiang Pengji's troops deeper into the enemy's rear. It would be too late for her to retreat. The grain carried by the 50,000 troops wouldn't be enough for them to rush out of Chenzhou. They could only be trapped in the hinterland of Chenzhou and die from a lack of food and water. Little did they know that Hua Yuan gathered the grain to the south of Chenzhou just to make it easier for him to steal. He didn't touch anything in Yuan Xion's letter when he left, but he imitated the notes and seals in Yuan Xion's letter and made a fake transfer order. When Yuan Xion realized that something was wrong, Hua Yuan openly took the grain away. If Jiang Pengji hadn't played her cards irrationally and disrupted the established plan, Yuan Xion might have reacted a few days later. Nie Sun realized that something was wrong and hurriedly informed Yuan Xion to send troops to chase after the grain. Yuan Xion didn't believe it at first. He thought that Nie Sun was deliberately looking for trouble. But when he thought of Hua Yuan's various actions, Yuan Xion was skeptical and sent troops to chase after the grain. It was a difference of 2 to 3 days. When Yuan Xion's troops arrived at the place where the grain was stored, they found that the grain depot was empty. Chapter 1281. Because of Hua Yuan's stroke of genius, Yuan Xion couldn't care less about Jiang Pengji. Jiang Pengji was also puzzled. I just beat up Yuan Xion. Who ambushed me? Why did he learn to behave? Jiang Pengji was not used to Yuan Xin not causing trouble. She was afraid that the road ahead would be full of traps. Unexpectedly, it was peaceful. Until Jiang Pengji met up with Feng Jin and the others, she did not encounter any obstacles. Yuan Xin could not even protect himself now. He had lost all the surplus food in Qinzhou. How could he still be in the mood to stop her? If it weren't for the supplies in the military camp, perhaps he would be the one who ran out of food now. Feng Jin was equally surprised when he heard Jiang Pengji's words. Yuan Xin is a reckless warrior. He has the most violent temperament. My lord has been causing trouble in Qinzhou for so long. Yuan Xin will definitely not let it go. In the end, there wasn't even a decent obstacle along the way. This is too unusual. Jiang Pengji shrugged her shoulders and complained. This Yuan Xin is really confusing. Previously, it was as if he had the help of God, as if his brain that had been forgotten in his mother's womb had grown back. Then, he suddenly went crazy and allowed me to lead the troops away. Where did Bogeo find such a clown? If Huang Song could hear her words, he would probably cry out in grievance. If he could, he did not want to find such a clown. His clown was a joker. Yuan Xin was born to be his bane. Feng Jin automatically ignored his lord's derogatory words. He smiled and said, "We'll know once we investigate. Let's see what he's up to." When she sent someone to investigate, she found that the atmosphere in Qinzhou was very strange. The situation was so tense that Jiang Pengji suspected that something had happened to Huang Song. Could it be Bogeo? Jiang Pengji thought maliciously. Feng Jin shook his head. If something had happened to Huang Song, there was no reason for there to be no news from the front lines, while Qinzhou was in a state of panic. The biggest possibility was that something had happened to Qinzhou, and it was not a small matter. Jiang Pengji said straightforwardly, "Then investigate again. Anyway, the person who is most anxious about something happening in Qinzhou is not me, but Bogeo." Feng Jin was speechless. His lord's words were very reasonable. Her words were priceless. Nonsense. She usually behaved more casually than anyone else, but once someone touched her eyebrows, she would explode like a firecracker. Yuan Xin could seal some people's mouths, but he couldn't make everyone keep their mouths shut. Not to mention that the food in Qinzhou had been stolen by an unknown force. Those who knew about it were panicking. When the food ran out, the first thing that would be affected was their own interests. There were always big mouths that couldn't keep their secrets. Was the most plastic sentence in the world. It was nothing more than, "I'm only telling you because we're brothers/friends. Don't you dare sell me out. I'll never tell anyone. Heaven knows, earth knows, and I know. Don't worry." Within a few days, the so-called secret had spread everywhere. Without food, everyone had to face the pressure of survival. Naturally, the so-called secret could not be kept. Jiang Pengji quickly solved the case. She knew the real reason why Yuan Xin did not stop her. This Yuan Xin, he's really cunning. He's a professional betrayer. Jiang Pengji could not help but give Yuan Xin a thumbs up. Not only did Yuan Xin's actions harm the people of Qinzhou, but he also caused his lord, Huang Song, to bleed. I don't know how Bogeo will react when he finds out. I guess he'll have to prepare a quick heart reliever. No, I have to get someone to prepare a banquet to celebrate. Feng Jin was most afraid of listening to Jiang Pengji's lewd words because he could not understand many of them. They were on two completely different channels. Yang Si listened with great interest. He could roughly guess the meaning of every lewd word from the context. The more he listened, the more he found it interesting. He felt that when he was old, he could write a biography specifically to recall his lord's lewd words. Maybe he could leave his name in history. Feng Jin looked at Jiang Pengji helplessly. His lord was an adult in her 20s. Why was she still so lively? Even if he took pleasure in other people's misfortune, he could not show it on the surface. He could just laugh in his heart. If he really cannot take it, he could go back to his room and laugh. Jiang Pengji continued. If Yuan Xin was not a member of the Yuan family, perhaps Bogeo would suspect that I sent him undercover. Yuan Xin was really capable of tricking his teammates. Feng Jin said, "My lord, this is a good opportunity to take down the entire territory of Qinzhou. Yes, I know, Jiang Pengji said. Counting the days, I've been sick for almost 3 months. It's time for me to recover. My trusted subordinates know that I'm pretending to be sick, but the soldiers and the people don't know. If I don't show up for a long time, people will be anxious and it will be easy for the enemy to take advantage of the situation. If she had waited longer, there might have been rumors that Jiang Pengji had died of illness. Jiang Pengji was very clear about the situation of her own forces. She used forceful methods to suppress those ambitious fellows and cut off their path to pursuing benefits. If she continued to be powerful, the other party would obediently lie low. If she showed signs of weakness or was unable to do as she wished, the other party would rise with the wind. This was a process of competition where one party would weaken while the other would strengthen. Jiang Pengji did not want them to lose control. Unbeknownst to them, the forces in Wu County were already ready to make trouble. Feng Jin said, "My lord, you mean?" Jiang Pengji said, "I have to go. You, Officer Meng, and the others will be fully in charge of the matters in Qinzhou." Qinzhou's vitality had been greatly damaged. It had no ability to cross the gorge and attack Songzhou. Jiang Pengji had no more worries. Feng Jin said, "I understand. I won't let you down." Just as he was rubbing his palms together and preparing to deal with Yuan Xian, someone unexpectedly beat him to it. Yuan Xian's troops did not manage to retrieve the rations. They did not even see Hua Yuan. He was frustrated and irritable. Yuan Xian felt that he was too ashamed to face Huang Song after losing such a good hand of cards. Alcohol was a good way to vent one's emotions. Yuan Xian was an alcoholic, so naturally, he was no exception. However, Yuan Xian's alcohol tolerance was not very good. He liked to lose his temper after drinking. He would beat, scold, and humiliate people at every turn. Almost no one dared to get close to him when he was drunk. Niesun knew this very well. Logically speaking, Niesun should have stood up at this time, but Sun's injury is very serious. The military doctor said that he needs to rest quietly until the wound heals. Otherwise, there will be a hidden danger that it will relapse and tear again. Niesun's face was pale. He could not hide the worry between his brows. The general has been drowning his sorrows in alcohol for several days. If the enemy takes the opportunity to attack, it's a small matter if we lose our lives, but I'm afraid that we will fail to live up to the Lord's expectations and lose the entire Qinzhou. I have a presumptuous request, and I hope that the 2 deputies can agree to it. Can you help me urge the general to drink less and pay more attention to military affairs? If this is successful, I will be deeply grateful and recommend both of you in front of the Lord. Just helping to persuade the general to drink less could make the military counselor owe them a favor. The 2 deputies were quite tempted and immediately agreed. Chapter 1282. The 2 deputies happily agreed, but when they met Yuan Xian, they realized that Niesun's favor was not so easy to owe. Yuan Xian was a violent drinker and had a terrible alcohol tolerance. He often beat people to vent his anger. Sometimes he was ruthless and a life might be lost. The soldier who delivered Yuan Xian's food was 2 steps late, and the food was a little colder than usual. He flipped over the food table in anger. Even a lowly soldier dares to neglect me. How infuriating! Yuan Xian was drunk, and his chest was filled with burning anger. The pawn had missed his meal because of his abdominal pain. From Yuan Xian's point of view, even a pawn was bullying him and making trouble for him. Thinking of this, Yuan Xian's killing intense sword. He pulled out the horsewhip hanging from his waist and whipped the soldier to death. By the time the 2 deputies heard the news and rushed over, the soldier had already been whipped to the point where he no longer looked like a human. His skin and flesh were split open. The 2 deputies remembered Niesun's promise, and their greed for the future overcame their fear. They pulled Yuan Xian from the left and right. What they didn't know was that Yuan Xian's strength increased after drinking. After accumulating strength, he broke free from their shackles. "How dare you? Do you want to rebel and disobey me?" Yuan Xin was too arrogant and could not tolerate anyone challenging his authority. His already violent and dark emotions were released to the maximum because of the alcohol. The two deputies did not help him, but helped the soldier stop him. Wasn't this a sign of betrayal? Yuan Xin was drunk. In his mind, he thought of Hua Yuan fooling him and the lost provisions. His violent emotions overflowed. Even you, two lowly beasts dare to disobey me. Yuan Xin hiccuped and rolled up the horsewhip with a grim smile. You don't want her dog's head anymore, do you? Men, take them down. The two deputies knew that Yuan Xin had a bad temper after drinking, but it wasn't to this extent. When the two of them heard Yuan Xin's slanderous and insulting words, their expressions changed. Yuan Xin could use the excuse of being drunk as an excuse, but what he said just now must be his true thoughts. He just did it well and did not show it. Now that he was drunk, he released the most brutal and real beast in his heart. The faces of the two deputy generals were ashen. They knew that Yuan Xin did not like to get close to martial artists of common birth and rarely promoted generals of this line. He preferred to get close to trusted aides that he had personally pulled up, but they did not expect Yuan Xin to have such thoughts. It was too chilling. There is no such thing as the coldest, only the coldest. They would never be able to guess what Yuan Xin would do when he was drunk. They couldn't guess the result, but Sun had an idea. Otherwise, he wouldn't have chosen them. Yuan Xin hated martial artists who were born as commoners. When they were rational, they still knew how to put on an act. But when they were drunk, they lost all rationality. He had always disliked these two deputies, but they had been promoted by Huang Song, so Yuan Xin could not openly suppress them. Now, Huang Song was not there, and no one could suppress the drunken and violent Yuan Xin, which made Yuan Xin's negative emotions explode to the maximum. The two deputy generals had also done something Yuan Xin hated. Not to mention a beating, a round of scolding was unavoidable. Not only did Sun understand Yuan Xin, but he also understood the two deputy generals. The two deputy generals were the most hard-working among the commoners. They were of low birth and had the ambition to climb up the ranks, so they could not stand others talking about their birth. Extreme inferiority would give rise to extreme self-esteem. Yuan Xin had repeatedly challenged their bottom line, so it was only a matter of time before the three of them killed each other. What did Sun do? All he did was gather the three fellows who were prone to explosive reactions together. However, even though Sun had calculated the whole situation, Yuan Xin's degree of cooperation still surprised him. This boorish man is so violent. The two deputy generals went to stop Yuan Xin, but he unexpectedly exploded and killed the two of them. It was not that they could not subdue Yuan Xin, but because of their status, they could only passively take the beating. When the barbed whip hit their bodies, a bloody groove would appear with each lash. The two of them asked for some medicine from the military doctor and applied it on their wounds. It hurt so much that their muscles twitched and their facial nerves went out of control because of the pain. You and I have been indebted to our master, so it is our duty to be loyal to him. What is Yuan Xin? Why should we suffer from his anger? The other person's injury was lighter. He was luckier and was only injured, but he looked much better than his companion. The first deputy general frowned and sighed helplessly. Don't say any more. This Yuan Xin is not much better than us. Who asked him to have good eyes and reincarnate well, becoming our master's uncle? If this matter blows up, we will be the ones to suffer. It is not worth it. If they could bear it, then bear it. They had to lower their heads when they were under someone else's roof. If they wanted to make a living, they could not afford to offend someone like Yuan Xin. Who knew when he would make things difficult for them? Yuan Xin, this boorish man, is the most vengeful. If we offend him today, who knows what kind of humiliation we will suffer in the future? The second deputy general remembered Yuan Xin's humiliation during the day and was so angry that his whole face turned green. He wanted to chop Yuan Xin's mouth and tongue into minced meat. The first deputy general lay on the bed and thought for a while. We are not the only ones who offended Yuan Xin. Why don't we ask the military counselor for a solution? From Yuan Xian's point of view, the two deputy generals and Nie Sun were natural allies. The enemy of the enemy was a friend. The second deputy general frowned and said hesitantly, "Is it okay with the military counselor?" The second deputy general sneered. Yuan Xian almost killed him. If not for the military counselor's luck, he would have reported to the king of hell long ago. If they could use this opportunity to get closer to Nie Sun, the two brothers would have a higher chance of success in the future. Nie Sun saw the two pitiful deputy generals and showed just the right amount of shock and worry. How did the two deputy generals end up like this? The two deputy generals complained to Nie Sun one after another. They were just short of hugging Nie Sun's thigh and crying. They had been targeted by Yuan Xian and hoped that Nie Sun could help. Nie Sun said awkwardly, "This matter, Sun is also unable to help. There's a strong enemy outside eyeing us covetously. This is not the time to cause trouble." The deputy generals felt a chill in their hearts. Nie Sun also retreated. Wouldn't they be killed by Yuan Xian? Nie Sun saw their sullen faces and revealed, "You don't have to worry. Yuan Xian has delayed military plans many times and made big mistakes. He trusted the scoundrels and caused a large amount of food to be stolen. Each and every one of them is a capital offense. If he is punished for several crimes, he won't be able to live in glory for long." The deputy generals were delighted when they heard this, but then they felt a chill. They were at war now. Yuan Xian's matter could only be settled after the war. The two of them were just commoner martial artists without any foundation. If Yuan Xian wanted to kill them, there were too many opportunities. Chapter 1283. The deputies looked at the weak military counselor. They did not have the heart to make things difficult for Nie Sun. After all, the military counselor was also a victim. Nie Sun continued, "Why don't you avoid him for the next 2 days and wait for him to calm down?" The deputies could not have asked for more. They knew to avoid Yuan Xian even without Nie Sun's reminder. Yuan Xian was a mad dog. In front of Yuan Xian, Nie Sun inadvertently brought up the matter of Yuan Xian whipping the deputies when he was drunk and advised Yuan Xian to abstain from alcohol and anger. Yuan Xian was already annoyed. Nie Sun reminded him again, so he directly vented his anger on the two deputies. The deputies could not bear the humiliation and became angrier. They wanted to twist Yuan Xian's head off. Both sides looked at each other with hatred. Nie Sun saw that the fire was good and added more firewood. Neither of the two deputy generals were honorable people. Due to their backgrounds and personalities, both of them were the typical type of people who would act arrogantly once they gained power. In front of Yuan Xian, the deputies were nothing. But in front of the common people, the deputies were high officials who could decide the life and death of the family. On the third day, Yuan Xian was drowning his sorrows in alcohol when a messenger came in to report something. A middle-aged man was crying outside with a roll of straw on his back. He frowned and said angrily, "Send him out." The messenger said, "The old farmer knocked and hid along the road, complaining that someone in the camp had taken his granddaughter and tortured her to death." "What?" Yuan Xian heard this and calmed down a little. He looked angry. Who dared to violate the military rules? Yuan Xian thought that the army was very strict. His lord Huangsong also forbade bullying the common people. Who dared to commit crimes against the law? How could Yuan Xian sit still when the victim's family had come to his door? It was not that he sympathized with the victim. It was normal for people to die in war, no matter how they died. He could not tolerate someone committing crimes under his nose and challenging his authority. Coincidentally, he needed a channel to vent his anger, so he sent people to bring the victim in. The victim was an old farmer in his 40s. His face was weathered, his skin was dark, and his face was full of wrinkles. "I pay my respects to the general." As soon as the old farmer came up, he bowed to Yuan Xian and addressed him as Great General, which made Yuan Xian feel very comfortable. "What difficulties do you have?" Yuan Xian asked. The old farmer bowed again and raised his hand to wipe the tears on his face. With red eyes, he wailed, "I have a granddaughter in my family. She's about to get married, but I didn't expect that a few days ago a soldier took a fancy to her and forcefully took her. I tried to find a way, but the soldier refused to let her go. He even said that he wanted to take my granddaughter as his mistress. I refused, so I beat him up. My poor granddaughter knelt down and begged for mercy for me, but he beat her to death. Yuan Xing said, "This general's troops are strictly managed. How could there be such a bastard who would forcefully abduct a civilian girl? My sons have all been conscripted. Some died in battle, and some are crippled. My daughter-in-law is long gone. My granddaughter is the only one who can do some farm work. Now that I don't even have a granddaughter, what's the point of me living?" The old farmer cried even harder. He said, "That soldier claimed to be a deputy general under the general's tent. He was so arrogant. Even if you gave me 10 guts, I wouldn't dare to slander him." Yuan Xin frowned. He was tipsy. His temper rose. He waved his hand and said, "There are only a few deputy generals under me. I'll call them here for you to see. If what you say is true, I'll stand up for you. If you're lying, be careful of your life." The old farmer cried, "I don't dare to offend the general and the other generals. My poor granddaughter, she died too miserably." A few deputy generals were called over. Recently, Yuan Xin had been too crazy. They didn't know why he called them. Maybe there was something important to discuss. When they entered the main tent, they found Yuan Xin sitting at the head and tail of the tent. A trembling old farmer knelt before him. The old farmer carefully turned his head to look at them. All the deputy generals were confused. Only one person was so scared that his face turned pale. He took a small step back. It was the first deputy general. The old farmer's eyes lit up. He pointed and said, "General, it's this soldier." Everyone looked at him in confusion. Yuan Xin fixed his eyes on him and laughed sinisterly. His eyes were filled with murderous intent. "Are you sure it's him?" The old farmer said, "I'm sure. It's this soldier who took my granddaughter and beat her to death." The first deputy general's face was so pale that it looked like it was covered in a layer of ash. His lips were completely pale. The murderous intent in Yuan Xin's eyes made his heart tremble. He never thought that this old farmer would carry his granddaughter's corpse to the camp to cause trouble. He had done something like this more than once. However, he wasn't the only one who had done such things. In ancient times, the conditions of war were harsh. The soldiers in the camp had to bear the pressure of life and death every day. If they held it in for too long, they would easily get into trouble. They needed a way to vent. At such times, sex became the best way. It could satisfy the body's needs and relieve the pressure. Even if the higher-ups strictly forbade them from disturbing the people, bullying them, and raping women and children, there would always be people who went against the wind and took advantage of the chaos to commit crimes. However, he was already a deputy general and could be considered an official. He didn't need to take the initiative to ask for this kind of thing. The old farmer's granddaughter was given to him by others. He felt that she tasted good and wanted to keep her as a concubine. He didn't expect the old farmer to be so insensible. He wanted to teach him a lesson, but he accidentally killed the old farmer's granddaughter. This matter could be easily suppressed, so why would it be brought to Yuan Xin's attention? The first deputy general's face was ashen. He rolled his eyes and pulled out his sword, wanting to silence him. He shouted angrily, "Don't slander me." "You still want to silence him?" Yuan Xin didn't like this deputy general from the start. He suffered from no solid evidence. Now that he had something on him, how could he let it go so easily? Seeing this, everyone instantly understood what had happened. They looked at each other. Yuan Xin boasted that the army was strict, but in reality, it was just that. There were many loopholes that could be exploited. Everyone covered up for each other. If Yuan Xin dealt with the first deputy general, the others wouldn't be so clean either. Making a prompt decision, they persuaded Yuan Xin to first remove the first deputy general from his position. They should first lock him up and carefully investigate before making a conclusion. There were so many unruly people now. Who knew if this old farmer had randomly picked up a corpse to blackmail them? Yuan Xin drank a little too much, and his mind was in a mess. Everyone persuaded him at once. His head hurt, and he could only agree. The first deputy general's heart was cold. When Yuan Exine sobered up, would he still be alive? Why not? Strike first and let Yuan Exine not have the life to pursue this matter. The second deputy general came to visit him. When he heard that he wanted to do something big, he was shocked. Do you want to die? The first deputy general said fiercely, if I don't take Yuan Exine's life, he will take my life tomorrow. The second deputy general's face darkened. He didn't dare to agree. What? Are you afraid? The second deputy general said, I'm not afraid. It's just that if Yuan Exine is killed, what should we do? The first deputy general said, in these years of war, we brothers have collected a lot of money. We won't starve to death no matter where we go. The second deputy general still didn't move. The first deputy general said, it's better to be a landlord than now. Marry 8 or 10 women, have a dozen children, and continue the family line. Chapter 1284. Get the wine. Yuan Exine squinted his eyes drunkenly. The skin above his neck was flushed due to the smell of alcohol, and he did not forget to mutter. Where is he? Where is he? Hurry up and get the wine. He thought he was shouting loudly, but in fact his voice was as soft as a mosquito almost coming out from his mouth. Yuan Exine lay sprawled on the bed of the commander, half of his body in the bed, and the other half outside. Although the alcohol content of the current wine was not high, and women who did not know how to drink could drink half a bottle, Yuan Exine drank in jars. No matter how good his capacity was, he could not resist drinking like a whale or a dragon. It was common for him to get drunk. At this moment, he was very drunk, and his body was sweating. He tore off his armor to cool down. It was still hot, so he pulled open his clothes. The alcohol took over his mind, and he fell into a deep sleep. In a blur of consciousness, he heard a few words coming from outside. I have an urgent matter. Yes, an urgent matter. I must discuss it with the general face to face. The person who spoke was Deputy General B. Behind him was a soldier with his shoulders shrunk and head bowed. The soldier seemed to be very afraid of strangers and kept looking at the ground without raising his head. It was late, and the soldiers guarding the main tent were also sleepy. They asked a few questions and let them in. Before entering, Deputy General B did not forget to remind them. The general has been in a bad mood these days. Keep your spirits up. Don't be distracted. The guard smiled flatteringly. I know, I won't be distracted. Although he said so, when Deputy General B brought people in, the soldiers guarding on both sides yawned lazily and became even more sleepy. Deputy General B was in the main tent, and it was safe enough. The brothers could also take the opportunity to slack off. Deputy General B entered the tent with the soldier. The soldier raised his head and puffed out his chest. It was the detained Deputy General A. A thunderous snoring came into the ears of the two. They looked at each other, walked around the screen for both sides, and entered the sleeping quarters inside the tent. Yuan Exine was sleeping soundly, his chest rising and falling, and his snoring rhythmically. Deputy General A's eyes were fierce, and he murmured, God is helping me. He actually took off his armor. Soon after, he grinned, revealing a mouthful of yellow teeth. If Yuan Exine had been wearing armor that protected all the vital parts of his body, they wouldn't have been able to land hit on him. Yuan Exine's struggle might have alerted the guards outside. Who would have thought that Yuan Exine would be so cooperative? He was completely defenseless. Wasn't he a lamb waiting to be slaughtered? He winked at Deputy General B. The two of them exchanged glances and understood each other's intentions. The two of them were good brothers who had supported each other until now. They could understand each other with just a look. Due to Yuan Exine's usual intimidation, they didn't dare to openly kill him. Not only did they lighten their steps, they even held their breaths. Deputy General B was only 3 steps away from Yuan Exine. He seized the opportunity and rushed forward. She used her hands to cover Yuan Exine's mouth and nose, then flipped over and pressed down on Yuan Exine's body, using the strength of her legs to press down on his shoulders. Assistant General A also moved. He pulled out the dagger hidden in his bosom. A cold white light flashed in the air, the blade about to kiss Yuan Exine's neck. Yuan Xin felt difficult to breathe in his sleep, and there was a heavy weight on his body. He subconsciously struggled to open his eyes and saw two ferocious faces. Yuan Xin was shocked, and a sense of danger surged in his heart. Before he could overturn Deputy Commander B, who was suppressing him, Deputy Commander A had already raised his sword and cut his throat. Blood spurted out with a puff sound. The two of them were sprayed by Yuan Xion's blood, but they didn't care. Deputy General A increased his strength until the blade was stuck in Yuan Xion's neckbone. Deputy General B turned over, and Deputy General A pulled out the knife and stabbed Yuan Xion's chest a few more times. Enough! Quickly pack up and leave. Deputy General B couldn't stand it, and quickly stopped his companion from abusing the corpse. Yuan Xion was already dead. Even if Almighty Immortal came, he wouldn't be able to save him. Why waste time on this kind of thing? Deputy General A retracted his hand and peeled off his bloody outer clothes. Before leaving, he turned his head and spat on Yuan Xion's body. Deputy General B adjusted his expression. His heart was beating like a drum, but he looked as if nothing had happened. The soldier on guard smelled the blood on the two. He raised his eyebrows and was about to ask. Deputy General B smiled bitterly. The general is not in a good mood. I'll go back and apply some hemostatic medicine. The soldier on guard suddenly understood. Yuan Xion was too violent these days. He often beat, scolded, and whipped people. Many people who went in were injured. He looked sympathetically at Deputy General B and let him go without further questioning. The two had just walked a few steps when a soldier on guard opened his mouth in surprise. Just now, I didn't seem to hear any movement in the tent. Deputy General B's heart trembled. He still pretended to be calm and moved forward, but his steps were slightly messy. At this time, someone shouted, "Quickly take them down, it's a trap." When Deputy General B and Deputy General A heard the words behind them, they immediately lost their sense of propriety and ran forward rudely, bumping into a group of patrolling soldiers. Their abnormal behavior was seen by the soldiers. Whether it was a trap or not, they had to capture them first. Although the two were strong, two fists couldn't fight against four hands. They were quickly captured. At this time, someone felt something was wrong. There was such a big commotion outside. Why didn't General Yuan Xion show any signs of anger? He gathered his courage and opened the tent. The thick smell of blood in the air caused his expression to change. He took 3 steps forward to take a look. A sharp and short scream attracted everyone's attention. Niesun had just fallen asleep when he received the news. When he heard that the 2 deputy generals had murdered General Yuan Xion, he was shocked. Disregarding his injuries, he stubbornly went over to take a look. The military doctor could only compromise and let the 2 soldiers support him to prevent his wounds from reopening. Except for certain circumstances, Niesun was a very obedient and cooperative patient. His wounds were very deep, but these days he had been obediently recuperating and drinking medicine. Coupled with his young body, the wounds healed quickly. At this time, the wounds had begun to scab, and he could occasionally walk a few steps. As long as there were no big movements or violent emotional changes, he should be fine. Why did you murder the general? Niesun looked at Yuan Xion's corpse, his eyes filled with shock and fear. Deputy General A had used a lot of force. Yuan Xion's neck had been cut open. The lower half of his body lay on the bed and the upper half outside. Because his head was hanging in the air, it revealed half a bloody cross-section. Blood flowed all over the ground. Yuan Xion was dead. Even as he died, his eyes were wide open, staring unwillingly at the top of the tent. The 2 deputy generals were tied up. Their faces were ashen, and their wretched appearance made it impossible to tell that they had once been valiant. Chapter 1285. Deputy General B knelt obediently. His hands were tied behind his back, and he looked as if he had lost his soul. Niesun had been recuperating. Of course, it was impossible for him to know what Deputy General A had done. Why did the general want to kill you for no reason? Deputy General A's face turned green, and he could not squeeze out a word for a long time. An insider came forward to explain the cause and effect of the matter. Nyesun's face turned pale when he heard that. He looked at Deputy General A with a sharp gaze. Forcibly seizing women, brutally killing women and children, violating military discipline. Are these all true? Deputy General A was speechless. The muscles on his cheeks wriggled because of the force he exerted. His lips moved for a long time, but he did not say a word. With witnesses and material evidence present, he did not even have the leeway to defend himself. What could he say? That he was not the only one who had done it, that others had done it as well, and that they had done no less than him? This was not a reason for him to absolve himself of the crime. There were unspoken rules in the military camp. Otherwise, why would the people secretly call the soldiers military bandits? They wore the clothes of the soldiers and did the dirty work of bandits. Many soldiers who used to be gangsters took advantage of the gaps in the war to secretly rob the people's money. They even rushed into the people's homes to bully women and children. This was a common occurrence. Not only did they bully the living, but sometimes they did not even let the dead off. They made a fortune by digging graves. Of course, digging graves was immoral, but sometimes it was an act of helplessness. If one day Jiang Pingji was so poor that she could not afford to support the soldiers, she might create a tomb raiding officer and embezzle the dead to support the living. The dead would not say a word, but the living would be resentful when they were bullied. No matter how many immoral things they had done, as long as it was not reported to the higher-ups, it could be treated as if nothing had happened, turning a big problem into a small one and a small one into nothing. However, this was based on the premise that no one interfered. Now that the victim's family came to ask for an explanation, Yuan Xin would definitely not let go of this opportunity. Deputy General A chose to kill Yuan Xin in order to save his life. He thought that they would be safe once Yuan Xin was dead, but he did not expect the matter to be exposed so quickly. Deputy General A did not say a word, tacitly agreeing with Nyesun's statement. Murdering the chief general, forcibly seizing women and children, and brutally killing women and children. Do you have any objections? After he finished speaking, Nyesun ignored Deputy General A and said to Deputy General B, "You conspired with him to kill the commanding general and knowingly broke the law. You should be executed for your crime. Do you have any objections?" Both of their faces were ashen. Nyesun waved his hand and said in an extremely cold tone, "Men, drag the two of them away and deal with them according to military law." The two of them were taken away. Only then did they come to their senses, and they struggled to beg Nyesun for mercy, hoping to make up for their mistakes. However, Nyesun did not relent. It was impossible for him to soften his heart. What are you waiting for? Take them all away. Yuan Xin, who was the main commander, was dead. Now, the military camp was in Nyesun's hands. He endured his illness and ordered people to collect Yuan Xion's body. Because of the urgency of the war, Yuan Xion's funeral could only be simple. Send someone to inform the lord of the funeral. Just tell him the truth. Nyesun acted decisively and decisively, either cutting off or suppressing a portion of the parasites that had attached themselves to Yuan Xion, then promoting a portion of people to fill in the gaps. A series of movements that flowed like clouds and flowing water gave people the feeling that they were not being given orders in the face of danger, but rather that they had been premeditated for a long time. However, feelings could not be counted. Even if there were people who muttered, they did not dare to say it out loud. Not to mention them. Even if Yuan Xion, Assistant General A, and Assistant General B were resurrected, the people involved would not be able to say what Nyesun had done behind the scenes. Even if this was a trap set by Nyesun, he was still the most innocent person on the surface. Because Nyesun had prepared for this for a long time, when the main commander was murdered, not only did the army not become shaken, but it strangely became much more stable. Nyesun continued to eliminate potential threats. Those who committed mistakes were punished severely, and those who performed meritorious deeds were rewarded handsomely. His methods were as swift as lightning, and he did his best to reverse the bad debts that Yuan Xion had left behind. This made people reevaluate this seemingly gentle and harmless military counselor. After a series of actions, the atmosphere became solemn, and the impetuous morale of the army was barely suppressed. Nyesun's methods were not comparable to Yuan Xian's. Feng Jin only found out about Yuan Xian's death a few days later. Dian Yin was an honest man, and he said whatever was on his mind. He was speechless and sighed. Yuan Xian died just like that? Feng Jin smiled and asked, "Otherwise, how do you think he should have died?" Dian Yin looked puzzled. He was no longer the naive person he used to be. He could hear the hidden meaning in Feng Jin's words. "What do you mean, military counselor?" Feng Jin said. "Don't you think that Nyesun's reaction was too quick?" Dian Yin couldn't help but scratch his head and said, "According to what I know, Nyesun is Master Yuanjing's son-in-law. Even Master Yuan Jing thinks highly of him. How can he be an ordinary person?" Nyesun was given an order in the face of danger, but he still managed to be so thorough. It can be seen that this person is also a rare talent. Feng Jin laughed and said, "Commandant Dian is also a rare talent. It's rare to see such a pure and innocent heart." Dian Yin was embarrassed and begged for mercy. "Military counselor, please don't laugh at me. What's going on here?" Feng Jin said, "On the surface, Yuan Xian died because of the hatred of the two deputy generals, but in reality, he died because of Nyesun's scheme." Dian Yin's eyes widened in shock. "You mean Nyesun urged the two deputy generals to kill the main commander?" Feng Jin shook his head, and Dian Yin was even more confused. Martial artists use tangible weapons to kill people, while schemers use invisible swords to kill people. Nyesun is a schemer. Feng Jin said, "Just as the Lord once said, once the ingenious scheme is known by others, it will lose its effectiveness. Similarly, the method of the schemer's murder is not known by outsiders. If Nyesun crudely ordered the deputy generals to kill the main commander, then when he executed the deputy generals, wasn't he afraid that the deputy generals would bite him before he died? The more ingenious and secretive the scheme, the higher the success rate. At the same time, it could protect the schemer's own safety and interests to the greatest extent." Feng Jin said, "Yuan Xian's death can't be separated from Nyesun, but no one has evidence against him. The only two witnesses were sent to the King of Hell a long time ago." Dian Yin shuddered after hearing this. Feng Jin said, "I also don't have evidence, but all kinds of coincidences point to Nyesun. When there are too many coincidences, it won't be a coincidence anymore." Dian Yin couldn't help but be speechless. Murdering the main commander. Nyesun isn't afraid of Huang Song coming after him? Huang Song was originally a suspicious person. Yuan Xian's death seemed to be well-deserved, but after a thorough investigation, Nyesun would definitely be suspected. Not having evidence doesn't stop a person from being suspected. Feng Jin said, "There's news that Nyesun sent his wife and daughter to the Yu family in Wanzhou. He's all alone now. He's barefoot and not afraid of wearing shoes. What's there to worry about? There's a prerequisite for Huang Song to come after Nyesun. He has to win against the Lord." Looking at the current situation, does Dian Yin think that Huang Song has a higher chance of winning? Rather than saying that Nyesun killed Yuan Xian to vent his anger and revenge, it's better to say that he staked everything on one throw and went all out. It's just, I don't know if Huang Song is worthy of Nyesun's painstaking scheme. Without Yuan Xian restraining himself, Nyesun could completely protect Shenzhou. Unfortunately. Chapter 1286. Dian Yin lamented, "Unfortunately, it's still too late." Feng Jin nodded in agreement and echoed, "It's indeed too late. If Nyesun had abolished Yuan Xian earlier, maybe my lord," he stopped here. "If Nyesun had full control over the deployment of the troops in Shenzhou and Yuan Xian had assisted from the side, maybe Jiang Pingji would have suffered a great loss." Nyesun's methods were not comparable to Yuan Xian's. Yuan Xian could lead troops to war, but he was far inferior to Nyesun when it came to planning. It was taboo to let a layman command an expert in a war. Yuan Xian was not a layman, but he was radical and reckless. He could easily mess things up. Yuan Xin could be a good knife, but he was not good at holding it. Dian Yin was Jiang Pengji's secret fan. Although his symptoms were not as obvious as Jiang Nongqin's, he also had a lot of confidence in Jiang Pengji. Hearing Feng Jin's words, Dian Yin retorted, "Even if Nie Sun alone controls Qinzhou, he can't do anything to my lord." Feng Jin smiled and said, "Yes, my lord is naturally the strongest." The fan was right. Feng Jin and Yang Si were the same. They had long given up on communicating with them. What was the strongest Jiang Pengji doing in Feng Jin's words? She had led the troops in Qinzhou and had enough fun. She left a mess for Feng Jin to deal with and left with her people. When Yuan Xin was murdered, she was only halfway there. In ancient times, the transmission of information was so backward. It would take some time for her to receive news. If she knew, she would definitely give Nie Sun a double click and leave a like. This move was very satisfying. Jiang Pengji rode on Little White's back and leisurely, humming a strange tune. Her leisurely manner did not seem like she was leading troops to war. Instead, she looked like she was taking a group of children on a picnic in the suburbs. What tune is my lord humming? He originally thought that his lord was humming casually, but after listening carefully for a while, he realized that a few of the tunes were repeated and not randomly hummed. It was different from the current tunes. The tune his lord was humming sounded very fresh. Jiang Pengji said in a cheerful tone, "March of the 10 Federal Armies." Yang Si could understand each word of the sentence when it was separated, but he could not understand it when it was put together. Yang Si asked in surprise, "March of the 10 Federal Armies? What kind of place is the Federation?" Jiang Pengji took advantage of the fact that Yang Si did not understand, so she simply fooled him. "The place I dreamed of was a faraway land of freedom." Even though it had been almost 10 years since she transmigrated, Jiang Pengji still missed her hometown. She had never forgotten it. "Freedom Village?" Yang Si replied with an "oh" and asked casually, "What kind of place is that?" Jiang Pengji recalled for a while and said calmly, "A place full of wars." For as long as she could remember, the Federation had been involved in countless wars. If it wasn't for the fact that the war situation was dire, the Federation wouldn't have needed to activate the Genetic Warrior Project. Jiang Pengji could be considered a victim of the plan, but at the same time, she was also a beneficiary. Without this plan, she would have died a long time ago, or become a normal citizen protected by others. Yang Si said in surprise, "A place that's filled with war. Can it be called the Land of Freedom?" Jiang Pengji smiled. "Maybe it's because the people in the dream started the war to fight for freedom. It was just like how the feudal vassals were vying for the world right now. Weapons were being raised everywhere, and it was also for the sake of pacifying the world. War is not good, but it is also a means to achieve goals. Starting a war to pacify the world. If this gets out, I don't know how many people will criticize and denounce you." Yang Si shook his head. "The feudal lords fight for the world for their own selfish desires. It's definitely not as magnanimous as my lord makes it out to be. My lord is different from them." Jiang Pengji smiled and asked in return, "What's different?" "My lord fights for the sake of peace in the 9 prefectures." You said this from the bottom of your heart. Not only do I believe it, but others also believe it. People are different from each other. The other feudal lords are different. Not everyone has such high moral integrity and awareness as you. To give the simplest example, my lord is willing to empty her private treasury for the sake of the people and the soldiers. Over the years, she has continuously invested tens of millions of coins and rarely used the public treasury. Others can't wait to squeeze the people and the soldiers dry and exploit their only interests as much as possible. They use their power to take the public treasury as their private property. Who would believe that people like that say that they fight for the world for the sake of the people and not for the supreme power and status in the world? Yang Si did not admit that he was flattering his lord. He was just telling the truth. From this point of view, it was not unreasonable for Jiang Nongqin to flatter the lord all day long. Jiang Pengji smiled and said, "I didn't expect Jing Rong to think so highly of me. In order to live up to your praise, I have to do my best." Yang Si coughed awkwardly. He inadvertently saw Jiang Nongqin's gaze. Her gaze was filled with one sentence. "You have good taste." Yang Si was speechless. What kind of experience would it be if the woman he liked was a brain-dead fan? The answer was, it was as if a green grassland had grown on my head and I could herd sheep at any time. Jiang Pengji said, "I have to hurry up." Yang Si was surprised. "Hurry up? Hurry up with what?" Jiang Pengji said, "Military reform. Didn't my lord say that it would be changed after the war is over?" Reform had always been about both risks and benefits. If it was not done well, it could cause a fatal disaster. Yang Si hoped that she could be more cautious. Jiang Pengji said, "It was indeed arranged until after the war is over, but it can be put on the agenda now. Give me some advice." The march was too boring. Even if there were idle fish in the live streaming room to amuse her, she could not indulge in the bullet screen. Yang Si was a sharp-eyed person. She had to be careful when she occasionally looked at the bullet screen to prevent Yang Si from discovering any clues. She had to find something to do to pass the time. Yang Si asked, "How do you plan to change it, my lord?" Jiang Pengji said, "I'm not very satisfied with the current military system. The authority and responsibilities are not clear, which slows down efficiency. The distribution of soldiers' pay is not clear. There are always villains who take advantage of the loopholes to eat without pay. No matter how strong the elites are, they can't stand being nibbled away by pests. There are also military discipline and rules. They were done well in the past, but there are still people who knowingly break the law. It must be because the price of committing a crime is too low, which encourages their arrogance." She wanted to be lazy and directly copy the federal military system, but she knew that it would not work. In order to maximize the benefits, Jiang Pengji could only deepen and improve the original basic items. She divided the authority and responsibilities, which was in line with the background of the times and could be accepted by people. Because she was born in the military and received genetic warrior training since she was young, she went to the battlefield at a young age, so she deeply understood how important powerful force was. Whether it was a country or a force, dignity, rights, and status all needed the support of powerful force. She wanted to carve out a bloody path in the chaotic world and build a country that was respected by all nations. Without powerful force, everything was empty talk. The army must be managed well. Military reform was inevitable. In her opinion, the current military system was terrible. There were so many drawbacks that she could talk about them for 3 to 5 hours. Jiang Pengji did not intend to complete the military reform in one go. She planned to take it step by step and reduce the turbulence and backlash as much as possible. Chapter 1287. In the beginning, the military system was simple and crude. There was no distinction between civil and military, and the military and the government were integrated. Although the local feudal lords had a certain ability to mobilize troops, they had to listen to the central royal family. There were policies from above and countermeasures from below, so it became common for local feudal lords to raise private armies and form private armed forces. The military power was too dispersed, and it naturally buried hidden dangers for the entire society. In order to comply with the political and economic system, the military system reform was also urgent. The military and government began to be separated and transformed into a highly centralized military system with a monarch as the center. Civil and military officials began to be separated, and the system of rewarding military achievements became clearer. The source of soldiers was shifted from a single channel to the common people, and then the pressure of military taxes was shifted to the common people. The military force was further expanded and strengthened, which was conducive to war mobilization. Nowadays, the military system was more complicated and ever-changing. Take Dongqing as an example. During times of peace, in order to ensure the stability of the source of soldiers, the Dongqing royal family ordered that the families of the soldiers be included in the military, forcing them to join the army for generations. During times of war, they forced ordinary people to join the army and forced them to risk their lives as soldiers. The word military was not a good word for ordinary people. If not for Jiang Pengji's various measures, the people would have avoided the military record. The soldiers under this kind of military system naturally did not have a high level of battle accomplishment. They would slack off in battle, at most a little better than the Marines. Local powers could also use money to recruit a large number of private armed forces, such as Jiang Pengji's former troops. The military systems of the 5 countries were almost the same, and most of them were inherited from the era of the Great Xia dynasty. Due to the different national conditions, there were slight changes. Jiang Pengji was very ambitious. She was not satisfied with the current situation. She wanted her army to become the real elite. She had been thinking about military reform for a long time. She already had a draft in her mind, and Yang Si listened attentively. The two of them would discuss in low voices from time to time. Time passed quickly. The more Yang Si listened, the more shocked he became. At the same time, his evaluation of Jiang Pengji increased. The fact that his lord was able to gain so many die-hard fans showed that she was very charming. He said, "If I do this, will anyone object?" Jiang Pengji secretly rolled her eyes. Were they against? It's not like they've ever tasted what it's like to be paid for nothing. They won't feel bad if they lose what they've never gotten. Yang Si choked and was immediately speechless. He could not help but wonder when his lord had the idea of military reform. Did she start planning early? Jiang Pengji and Yang Si were talking about the issue of one person having more than one position and more salary. To give the simplest example, if Yang Si had more than one position, he alone could receive the salary corresponding to his position. In reality, only one of the many positions was real, the others were just empty titles. To put it more simply, he did the work of one person, but in the end, he took the salary of several people, which led to the waste of resources. Jiang from Jiang. Jiang and outside, Jiang from Jiang. Jiang title. Whoever Jiang, they would to work, to they, and had in service. And workers. Jiang terms, Jiang were to be, and in times, to times. It wasn't a big problem in peacetime, but in times of war, it was a fatal point. According to the current system, there were too many monks and not enough gruel. In the long run, it would be detrimental to internal stability and development. The two of them talked from noon to sunset and happened to mention military discipline. Yang Si said, "In my opinion, the strict discipline of the army under your rule is already rare in the world." To what extent could he change it further? Jiang Pengji shook her head and said, "You can't put it that way. On the surface, no one has committed any crimes, but has there not been a single case of breaking the law secretly?" Yang Si was silent for a moment. He really couldn't guarantee it. Nothing was absolute. War was so chaotic, and it was hard to guarantee that no one would take advantage of the chaos to cause trouble and bully the common people. Jiang Pengji continued, "They don't dare now because I'm still young and I'm still a deterrent. If I'm no longer around after 100 years, the deterrents will no longer exist, and the general leading them will have evil intentions. At that time, if the upper beam is not straight, the lower beam will be crooked. The entire army will cover up for each other, deceiving their superiors and subordinates. Won't the victim be the one suffering? As the saying goes, the people don't fight with the officials, and they don't fight with the army. If there are really villains causing trouble, it will be really hard to guard against." Yang Si smiled bitterly. "My lord, you're thinking too far ahead." Although he said so, he still agreed with Jiang Pengji's words in his heart. His lord wanted to reform the army. She hoped that in the future, without a wise and mighty leader, the military camp could still maintain a sense of righteousness. I've heard a saying, "Loyalty is because the bargaining chips for betrayal are too low," Jiang Pengji said. Similarly, law-abiding is because the bargaining chips for breaking the law are not enough. If the bargaining chips for breaking the law are tempting, there will naturally be people who will take the initiative to trample on the law. Then, I will increase the price that needs to be paid for breaking the law. It will be so painful that no one dares to touch the bottom line. Jingrong, what do you think of this idea? After listening, Yangtze laughed and teased. My lord, you should say this to Wenbin. If he hears this, he will definitely regard it as a famous saying to warn the world. Wasn't the law that Hanyu pursued all his life? Jiang Pengji said, just say it's good or not. Why do you drag Wenbin into this? It's good, but, Yangtze said, going too far is as bad as not going far enough. His lord's idea was very good, but there had to be a limit. Otherwise, it would be counterproductive. Jiang Pengji nodded and said, I know this. That's why I want to unify the management of military records and record them. If anyone violates military discipline, not only will they cut off their own path to promotion, but they will also implicate their descendants. They won't be able to enter politics or the military for 3 generations, and their descendants won't be able to enjoy all the benefits of being a soldier's family. In the future, when the Golden Scale Academy expands its branches, the descendants of soldiers who have made mistakes will also be rejected. Yangtze secretly touched his nose. He had just told her that going too far is as bad as not going far enough. His lord directly made a ruthless move. If this system was implemented, who would dare to commit a crime? The price of committing a crime was too high. Many people had the obsession of carrying on the family line and bringing honor to their ancestors in their minds. Once military discipline was violated, not only would it bring shame to their ancestors, but it would also harm the future of their descendants. In some ways, this was more painful than killing someone. Jiang Pengji said, this is just a general idea. As for how to decide, we still have to wait for everyone to gather and brainstorm. Apart from this, Jiang Pengji and Yangtze also discussed a lot. Jiang Nongqin looked at his lord with stars of worship in her eyes. Yangtze was angry at first glance. Wasn't he better looking than his lord? He had wasted a lot of saliva this afternoon. Why didn't she take pity on him? Where's mine? Yangtze asked the water bag in Jiang Nongqin's hand eagerly. Jiang Nongqin sneered. No, this is my lord's. Yangtze was speechless. Chapter 1288. Yangtze's heart suffered a violent blow, but he didn't dare to find trouble with his lord, because his lord was about to turn into a firecracker, and he didn't dare to provoke her. This matter started from the battle report that they had received not long ago. Jiang Pengji and Yangtze chatted happily. Jiang Pengji enjoyed the water bag that Jiang Nongqin offered to her. She drank it up under Yangtze's resentful gaze. Before she could sigh, the messenger outside said that he had something important to report. Jiang Pengji frowned and muttered, what can happen at this time? Only a few people knew that she led an army of 50,000 to harass Huang Song in Qinzhou, let alone send a messenger to intercept her halfway. Let him in. In order to deliver the news, the messenger had been traveling day and night. He was already exhausted and looked tired. However, when he saw Jiang Pengji, his eyes lit up. He said, my lord, the front line at Hu County's border has fallen. The enemy has invaded Hu County's Mound River County, and more than 6,000 soldiers have died. Lieutenant Luo Yu led the remaining soldiers to retreat to the Three Mountains Canyon. Counselor Han Yu went north to provide support. The situation has stabilized for now. Jiang Pengji widened her eyes in shock. She didn't seem to understand what the messenger had said. Hu County has fallen, and we've lost Mound River County? Only by relying on Wenbin's troops to restrain Huang Song's troops can they barely stabilize the Three Mountains Canyon? Her voice suddenly rose. Although it wasn't loud, everyone had the illusion that the atmosphere was stagnant and they couldn't even breathe. Jiang Pengji's expression turned cold. She retracted her aura. The messenger felt the warmth that had receded return to his body. Answer me carefully. What happened at the front line? The terrain of Hu County was rather unique. It was surrounded by steep mountains, but the territory was flat and the mountains were low. After Lu Shi's management, the river water was introduced and underground water was developed vigorously. This solved the drought in Hu County and made it the most productive county in Dongqing. Mound River County was close to a man-made river, which was also the place that produced the most food in Hu County. Huangsong's army had broken through Hu County's defense line. The pressure on the defense suddenly increased, and Hu County was in danger. If it weren't for Han Yu, who saw that the situation wasn't looking good and led his troops to contain Huangsong's troops, Hu County would have lost more than one county. In another 2 or 3 months, it would be the autumn harvest. Huangsong had made a huge profit this time. The messenger replied with fear and trepidation. Jiang Pengji was burning with rage. Those old bastards. I'm not dead yet, and I'm not dead yet. Who gave them to? Didn't she say that she assigned a large number of troops to defend Hu County? Although it wasn't an impenetrable fortress, it wasn't made of paper either. How did it fall so quickly? It turned out that there was a mole. Jiang Pengji was really angry. Because Hu County was Liu Shi's old territory, when Jiang Pengji took over, the forces in Hu County were well-behaved. She didn't go out of her way to create trouble, so both sides lived in harmony. Unexpectedly, when she pretended to be sick, those old farts couldn't sit still anymore. Yang Si said, "My lord, don't be angry. Think about it from another perspective. It's a blessing, not a curse. It's better to expose it now than to cause trouble later." Fortunately, Hu County was not completely lost. Only Zhanghe County was lost. Huangsong's losses in Chunzhou were enough to make up for it. I understand, but I'm angry. Jiang Pengji gritted her teeth. I hate betrayal the most. She hated the word betrayal. She admired those who were loyal and unyielding, but she also hated those who were fickle. Once they obeyed her, no matter if they were sincere or if they were pretending, they could never betray her in the future. Otherwise, no matter who it was, they had to die. Others might not know this, but Wei Xiai knew it. Why did Su Ku in his previous life say that he was fickle and rebellious? It was because Su Ku's former master was killed by Her Majesty. Su Ku pretended to be loyal, but he secretly contacted the remnants of his former master to cause trouble. Although it didn't cause much trouble, Su Ku really angered Her Majesty. He became the only counselor she killed. The others either committed suicide, hid their identities, or surrendered. Her Majesty also tried to respect the moral integrity and beliefs of the literati. Su Ku was miserable. Not only did he die without a whole body, but his body was left in the wilderness to be eaten by wild beasts. Of course, in this life, Su Ku became head butler Su. Naturally, his ending wouldn't be so tragic. Jiang Pengji said, "Those old fellows are too lonely to die, so they want to drag the whole clan down with them, right?" Even though Yang Si was a literati, he could feel Jiang Pengji's murderous intent. He said tactfully, "Traitors naturally can't be used." It was enough to kill a few typical people to establish dominance. It wouldn't implicate the whole clan. To be precise, it should be, traitors, it's a waste of air to keep them alive. Jiang Pengji corrected him. Although she was angry, she was still rational. I have to answer to the 6,000 soldiers who sacrificed themselves. I can't blame Bogeo, because war is a game with lives. The winner lives, the loser dies. There's no room for negotiation. But I won't let go of any sinner who stabbed me in the back and caused the soldiers to die unjustly. What's the use of only killing the typical people who made mistakes to establish dominance? I have to let everyone know the price of betraying me. If they died in the game of war, at least the sacrifice of the soldiers was still worthwhile. She couldn't accept dying because of the betrayal of her own people. It's my fault. All these years of self-cultivation have made them think that I'm weak and easy to bully. A fierce look flashed in Jiang Pengji's eyes. Yang Si was so shocked that he couldn't say anything to dissuade her. "My lord, it's a little strange." Yang Si and Jiang Nongqin were sent out. He muttered to the latter in a low voice. "What's strange?" Jiang Nongqin was still expressionless. Jiang Pengji's orders were golden rules. She didn't need to question them. She just needed to carry them out. Yang Si said, "My lord's resistance to the word betrayal is so intense that it doesn't seem like a reaction that ordinary people should have." Jiang Nongqin frowned. "What do you mean?" Yang Si said, "No matter how much ordinary people hate betrayal, Their reaction won't be so intense unless they've been deeply betrayed. Looking at my lord's experience over the years, she's the one who plays tricks on others. When has it ever been someone else's turn to betray her? That's why I find it strange. Jiang Nongqin said, "You're thinking too much." My lord's true nature. Yang Si said, "Yes, you're right. Her lord's abnormality would always be normal in her eyes. Asterisk, 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 as a normal person. Why was he so clumsy that he took a liking to her, who was sick in the head?" Jiang Nongqin was a brainless fan. She always wore a filter that was as thick as the bottom of a glass bottle. Yang Si was different, so he was keenly aware of the abnormality. However, this abnormality didn't mean anything, so he didn't delve into it. The truth was often just a little off. Yang Si's guess was right. Jiang Pengji, who disliked everyone, had indeed been betrayed. Chapter 1289. The person who betrayed Jiang Pengji was none other than the comrade she made in the genetic warrior training camp. He was a traitor who betrayed important federal secrets for his own selfish desires. The leak of secrets led to the collapse of the front line. At least 1 million soldiers paid the price with their lives. It was the greatest loss the Federation had suffered in the past century. During the mission, Jiang Pengji gave her back to the traitor without any precaution and almost lost her life. The traitor framed Jiang Pengji and made her the scapegoat. She was just an ordinary genetic warrior with no background. Once the crime was confirmed, she would definitely die. The Federation issued an arrest warrant. Jiang Pengji was unwilling to sit still and wait for death. She used force to break through the siege and escape. She crossed several planets and persevered to kill the traitor. She wanted to give an explanation to the soldiers who died in vain and prove her innocence. She killed the traitor before he boarded the spaceship outside of the country. At the same time, she obtained important evidence to prove her innocence. Even though she was proven innocent because she resisted arrest and killed her comrade. No one could take away the life of a traitor before the authorities officially convicted her. Jiang Pengji was forced to retire from the ranks of genetic warriors and enter the 7th Corps as an ordinary federal soldier. On the first day, she bumped into her old boss. The other party spoke a few words to her. She could still remember them clearly. "Jiang Pengji, I've seen your information. You're really brave. You resisted arrest with force. You're destined to be a member of the 7th Corps." Jiang Pengji straightened her back stubbornly and repeated her words. "I'm not guilty. I'm innocent. Why should I accept an unreasonable arrest that will kill me? You're a soldier. Nothing is reasonable or unreasonable. Obedience is your duty." The old superior said, "Moreover, do you have no confidence in the Federation? Even if the evidence is conclusive, they'll verify it in detail. Finally, they'll convict you after a trial in the military court." Jiang Pengji's face turned red. "I'm just an ordinary genetic warrior. Who knows if I'll be used as a scapegoat? The genetic warrior training plan is a failure. It's rare to see such a unique genetic warrior with such ideas." The old superior laughed. "TSK, TSK, you have a lot of conspiracy theories. You read a lot of novels, right?" Jiang Pengji was speechless. "Those who dare to convict you, send you to the military court, or secretly execute you without any solid evidence. I'm afraid they won't even." Before he could finish his sentence, the other party suddenly smiled and said, "It's getting late. I still have a meeting to attend. Go report to the recruit office first. We'll talk again if fate allows it." Jiang Pengji was more experienced in actual combat than the new recruits. In just a few years, she had been promoted based on her solid achievements. She met her old boss for the second time. The other party seemed to have completely forgotten about her and only treated her as an ordinary subordinate. Jiang Pengji did not deliberately try to befriend him until the old boss retired due to certain reasons. She also grew to be his successor. The younger generation will surpass the older. The old boss smiled and said, "I'll leave the 7th Army to you." Yes. Every time Jiang Pengji thought about it, she would sigh with regret because she had failed to live up to her old boss's high hopes and expectations. Before she transmigrated, she felt that she was a competent commander. After transmigrating for nearly 10 years, she had gradually changed her way of thinking. As an individual soldier, she was very good, but as the core of the frontline army, she was still lacking. Perhaps it was to make up for it, or perhaps it was out of empathy, but Jiang Pengji desperately wanted to be a good lord because she could not disappoint the people who followed her. I don't even have the courage to give an explanation to the 6,000 innocent soldiers who died unjustly. I have lived in vain. Jiang Pengji secretly clenched her fists. She had made up her mind. There was no one around. Only the bullet screens on the live stream screen were unwilling to be left out. They silently refreshed their messages. Walnut, do walnut. Streamer, I have no opinion on punishing the main culprit, but isn't it too much to implicate the family? I'm not a brainless saint. I just feel that the streamer has a good reputation now. There's no need to fill in your reputation for these people and leave behind a controversy 1,000 years later. Sankanwu Antifa. Traitors are shameful, but their relatives are innocent. The streamer is not an unreasonable person, right? Tudu Faccio. There's nothing wrong with that. I support the streamer. After all, it's a different era. We can't use our values to demand the streamer. Boss Chow used his father's death to conquer Shuzhou. How many people did he kill in Shuzhou? Although his father's death was not the main reason, it was indeed one of the reasons that pushed Boss Chow. The streamer was betrayed. If she didn't let others see the price of betraying her, there would only be more people who would betray her in the future. Because the price of betrayal was too low, loyalty seemed cheap. In troubled times, kindness and benevolence could only be regarded as neutral words. Because excessive kindness and benevolence would only bring about endless betrayal and harm. Not only would the lives of the people around the streamer be sacrificed, but the streamer herself would also be sacrificed. I originally thought that the streamer was more like Boss Chow. Now that I look at her, she's more like Lu Big Ear. Guekai Guo Fengxiu. I don't think it's too much. For outsiders like us who are watching the show, 6,000 casualties is just a cold number. But for the families of the soldiers, they're all corpses lying on a battlefield. They are wounds that will never heal. Even the ancient big shots in the live stream jumped out to mock her. How could the other idle people sit still? Many old people knew how bad Jiang Pengji's temper was. She would tear apart the idle people at the slightest provocation. She had indeed become much gentler in the past 2 years. Because she was too gentle, some newbies in the live stream held her to the standard of a saint. Reality proved that the possibility of Jiang Pengji becoming a butcher was far greater than that of a saint. No matter who tried to persuade her, the people of Hu County and the entire clan who betrayed her were already dead in her eyes. Wei Ci received the news that Hu County had fallen 2 days earlier than Jiang Pengji. When he received the news, he had a premonition. Sai, at least you've lived for a few years in this life. Don't cry injustice in front of the king of hell. You didn't die unjustly at all. If it weren't for the variable Lu Shi, the people of Hu County would have been cut into pieces by the Lord. How could they have survived until now? With great difficulty, fate had turned around and prevented the fate of the entire clan from being buried. Why didn't this group of people know how to cherish it? Instead, they wanted to die? Fate is really an interesting thing. Wei Ci looked up at the bright, starry sky. The stars in the eyes of others were a mysterious code to him. Huang Song led the army to break through the front line of Hu County and took over Zhangyi County. Before the joy had completely passed, Huang Song received news. Lanting has recovered from his illness. It was just a few words, but Huang Song felt the pressure on his shoulders increase. It was as if there was an invisible pressure. It made it difficult for him to breathe. At the same time, it made him secretly excited. Complicated emotions intertwined and merged into an indescribable emotion. Cheng Jing said, "The Lord is very happy." Huang Song said, "Lanting is seriously ill. It's an unfair battle. She's recovered. Of course, she's happy." Because of the pressure Jiang Pengji had exerted for a long time, Huang Song was very open-minded about this battle. Chapter 1290. Lu Shi had recovered from his illness and returned. The news was like a sudden clap of thunder. Huang Song did not say anything, but those with ulterior motives could no longer sit still. It was as if their buttocks were on fire, especially the forces in Zhanghe County of Hu County. They secretly colluded with Huang Song and betrayed the soldiers fighting at the front line of Hu County, causing the front line to collapse. More than 6,000 people were killed or injured, and Zhanghe County was lost as a result. This was when Cheng Yuan, Meng Heng, Luo Yue, and the others were sufficiently prepared. If they did not notice, the casualties would be more than 6,000. Perhaps the entire army would be wiped out, and tens of thousands of soldiers would be buried. The group was burning with anxiety. They were afraid that Jiang Pengji would settle the score with them later. They sent someone to sound out Huang Song, afraid that he would go back on his word and betray them. Because they had betrayed Jiang Pengji, they were also afraid that Huang Song would betray them. This could be considered some kind of retribution. Huang Song said, "Since you have pledged your allegiance to me, I will naturally protect you. As long as I am not defeated, Lanting cannot do anything to you." Everyone breathed a sigh of relief. As long as Huang Song did not push them out, it was fine. However, they neglected that the premise of Huang Song's protection was not defeated. If they were careless and defeated, would Jiang Pengji let them go? Of course not. They had Huang Song's protection, so there was no hurry for the time being. Those who were flirting with Huang Song and leaning on the wall to climb over were the ones who were panicking. Lu, she has actually recovered from his illness? How did she recover? Didn't she say that she was dying of illness? She didn't even show up after the successive defeats on the battlefield. There were more than 3 to 5 local tyrants in Hu County. Zhanghe County had pledged their allegiance to Huang Song, but the other counties had not had time to jump over. In other words, they were still in Jiang Pengji's territory. Their lives were in her hands. Someone said sarcastically, "She's so lucky." They all hoped that Jiang Pengji would die quickly. Because there had been no news, many people had already tacitly agreed that she had been booked by the King of Hell. Unexpectedly, Jiang Pengji returned in a high-profile manner after a few months of silence. It scared the hell out of them. Didn't you spend a lot of money to hire eminent monks and Taoists to curse her? In the end, not only did she not die, but she came back alive and kicking. Speaking of this matter, there were even people who felt gloomy. They had been fooled by those bald donkey Taoist priests, saying that the dead didn't exist. What's the point of saying this now? We're all in the same boat. Now that Lu Shi is back, I won't be able to gain any benefits, and neither will you. Everyone was silent for a long time before they raised their heads and looked at each other. After a long while, "Anyway, we haven't done anything yet. Let's put away the evidence and observe the situation before making a decision." They all thought that Jiang Pengji was seriously ill and had no children. Once she died, her power would inevitably be annexed by Huang Song. Therefore, they couldn't wait to find Huang Song to take over the business. How could the icing on the cake compare to providing timely help? If they did not express their stance now, it would be too late for them to cling to him after Huang Song annexed Jiang Pengji's power and became the first Duke of Dongqing. Who knew? Sigh. He hadn't expected that the sickly invalid would actually be able to catch his breath. Fortunately, there was still room for negotiation. As long as the evidence of their collaboration with Huang Song's letter was burned, even if Jiang Pengji accused them of colluding with the enemy and betraying the enemy, they would insist that there was no such thing. They would renege on their debt to the end and refuse to admit it. Would she be able to drag Huang Song over to confront her? Thinking of this, everyone's anxious hearts calmed down. Before they could rejoice for too long, they discovered with ashen faces that the letters they had carefully placed were all gone. They had been robbed. Who was the thief who stole the letters? They all thought of one person at the same time, and their faces turned pale. Blessings never come in pairs, and misfortunes never come alone. With the disappearance of the letters that colluded with the enemy, something even worse happened. The graceful and luxurious woman could no longer maintain her airs. She hurriedly said, "Master, it's bad. There are many soldiers outside, surrounding the mansion." The guard tried to stop them, but they ended up as dead souls under the blades. The strong smell of blood rushed into their nostrils, scaring the noble woman so much that she turned pale. "What are you doing?" She was horrified to see that all the family members, servants, and guards in the mansion had shiny blades on their necks. "What are we doing? Can't you see with your own eyes? Arrest all of them." The same situation played out in all the families. Some people were crying and wailing, some were at a loss, and some were disheartened. Many family members cried out that they were innocent and begged for mercy. There were also some people who maintained their status and berated the soldiers. They did not have the slightest self-awareness of being prisoners. "Sir, they are innocent." Some people had a backbone and refused to lower their heads. But there were also people who lowered their heads to the boorish men they despised and called them sir for the sake of their lives. "Innocent." The soldier who led the team to arrest them sneered and said bluntly, "No one is innocent. I will bear the consequences of my own actions. Women and children are innocent after all. Do you think you can bear the consequences?" The soldier sneered. "Even if you are willing to bear the consequences, it depends on whether the 6,000 soldiers who died in vain are willing or not. In this world, only the nobles were innocent. Did the parents, wives, and children of the ordinary soldiers deserve it? It was not shameful to die in the hands of the enemy, but it was shameful to die in the betrayal of one's own people. There is a distinction between the main culprit and the accomplices. How can you kill them all?" The soldier said, "It's the Lord's job to convict them. We are only responsible for arresting them." Because he was worried that the criminals would escape, Meng Hung specially sent soldiers to arrest the families with conclusive evidence and await Jiang Pengji's trial. Jiang Pengji took a detour to meet Han Yu's troops. Coincidentally, Wei Ci was also at the front line. When she saw Wei Ci, her mood improved a little. Everyone knew that Jiang Pengji was in a bad mood and tacitly did not mention what happened in Hu County. Instead, they were concerned about her gains in Qinzhou. Jiang Pengji conveniently mentioned Yuan Xian's incident, hoping that everyone would learn from Yuan Xian and not make the same stupid mistake. Wei Ci said, "A day ago, I received news that Yuan Xian is dead." Jiang Pengji responded with an "oh" and asked calmly, "How did he die?" She received the news from the front line and rushed all the way. She guessed that she had missed the messenger, so she did not know that Yuan Xian was already dead. Yuan Xian was killed by 2 deputy generals after he was drunk. Wei Ci said, "Because the deputy generals forcibly took a girl from a good family and caused her death, they violated military discipline and were reported by the victim's family. They were afraid that Yuan Xian would punish them according to military law, so they took the opportunity to kill him." Jiang Pengji said, "The victim's family reported him? What a coincidence." She did not believe in coincidences. If there were too many coincidences, it would reveal a sense of scheming. Wei Ci nodded. "I have the same thoughts." Jiang Pengji said, "Yuan Xian was our good friend. It's a pity that he died." Wei Ci was speechless. If Huang Song heard this, he would be very heartbroken. Wei Ci said, "I'm worried about Sangzhou. With Yuan Xian's death, the power in Qinzhou will fall into the hands of Niesun. This person is not easy to deal with." Jiang Pengji said, "The food in Qinzhou has been swindled by a man named Hua Yuan. Niesun can't cook without rice. His good cards were ruined by Yuan Xian. After Niesun took over, he was just struggling at death's door." Wei Ci heard a familiar name and was surprised. "Hua Yuan?" Jiang Pengji asked. "Yes, he's quite a treacherous person. He's good at swindling food and drinks." Chapter 1291. Yang Si keenly noticed the flash of surprise on Wei Ci's face. He laughed and said, "Zi Xiao, you really know everything. Do you know this person?" Everyone's gaze turned to Wei Ci. The latter hesitated for a moment, not knowing if he should speak. Without waiting for Wei Ci to speak, Jiang Pengji said, "Who cares if he's Hua Yuan or Chao Yuan? It's not our turn to think about him. Bogeo is the victim." This sentence sounded like mockery, but in fact, it was to change the topic and help Wei Ci out of his predicament. When Yang Si heard Jiang Pengji speak, He could only rub the bridge of his nose, asking for a snub. He did not pursue the matter. It was not a good deal to be targeted by the Lord just to satisfy a moment's curiosity. Yangtze admitted that he was rather curious. Although Wei Si was not a shut-in, he was not a traveling frog who traveled all over the world to study and never returned home. How could he know so much information? He knew almost all the places that produced the kind of talents. It was simply unscientific. Could it be that Wei Si secretly had an intelligence department that outsiders did not know about? Jiang Pengji secretly protected him, but Wei Si did not dare to enjoy it calmly. None of the people present were easier to deal with than Qi Guanrang. If this special treatment made them hate him, it would accumulate into a reason to attack him in the future. Wei Si felt that he would die faster in this life than in his previous one. In the blink of an eye, thousands of thoughts flashed through his mind. Wei Si said, "I've heard a little about Hua Yuan." Yangtze immediately perked up. Most people who Wei Si remembered were not easy to deal with, such as Sun when back then. Wei Si smiled bitterly and said, Hua Yuan was born in a small clan in Nanxing. His parents died when he was young. When he was young, his uncle and aunt arranged for him to marry the legal wife's daughter of a declining aristocratic family. He was gentle and somewhat weak, but his wife was shrewish and arrogant. They had a son and a daughter. During the disaster of the southern barbarians, Hua Yuan's family fled deep into the mountains to take refuge. In the end, their whereabouts were betrayed by the servants in the family. His wife and daughter died tragically. He briefly described Hua Yuan's life. Everyone listened with a face full of confusion. Jiang Pengji said in surprise, "As far as I know, Hua Yuan's temperament and the Hua Yuan that Zixiao spoke of are completely different people. If Hua Yuan was really a gentle and cowardly person, even in Shui wouldn't be able to subjugate him, much less set up a series of schemes to steal Yuan Xian's food. According to the information they had received so far, Hua Yuan was definitely not someone who was easy to deal with. I made a mistake." Yangtze clapped his hands and laughed. "Zixiao, you made a mistake this time. See, I hasn't finished speaking." How would Jingrong know that CI is wrong? It said that when Hua Yuan's mother was pregnant, she gave birth to a pair of boys. Wei Si had just said a few words when Yangtze's eyes lit up. How could he have forgotten that Wei Si had a pen name of Layman Zaiki? Every novel that he published left him mesmerized. Art came from life and was superior to life. As soon as he heard the beginning of the story, Yangtze's interest was piqued. He could not help but perk up his ears and listen quietly. Wei Si said calmly, his eldest son died before he reached the age where he could grow teeth. His second son survived and was named Hua Yuan. Before Hua Yuan could be enlightened, his parents contracted an epidemic and passed away. His family business was seized by his uncle and aunt. On the surface, his uncle and aunt treated Hua Yuan very well and did not mistreat the only son left behind by his elder brother. But behind his back, they used underhanded methods to try to raise Hua Yuan into a useless person. When Hua Yuan turned 20, his uncle and aunt arranged for Hua Yuan to marry an unreasonable wife who was shrewish and had a secret affair with someone before marriage. After marriage, this woman held all the power in the family. She was dissolute and did not know how to restrain herself. Hua Yuan was cowardly and did not know how to resist. Until the disaster of the southern barbarians, his wife colluded with her secret lover. The two planned to rob Hua Yuan's family's wealth and flee far away, betraying the hiding place of Hua Yuan's family. In the end, Yangtze listened intently and hurriedly asked, "In the end? What happened in the end?" The story was about to end when Wei Si stopped. Wasn't this deliberately tormenting people? Wei Si's eyes were indifferent as he said, Hua Yuan killed with a borrowed knife. This couple, along with their illegitimate child, were all killed by the barbarians. After all, it was an ancient era where there were not many novels. The story that Wei Si spoke of was still very interesting. Yangtze was stunned for a moment. This story sounded anticlimactic, but after thinking about it carefully, it was extremely frightening. Wei Si said, Ever since Hua Yuan's parents passed away due to an epidemic, he suffered from insanity. He was sometimes clear-headed and sometimes muddled. When he lost his mind, he told others that he was not Hua Yuan, but Hua Yuan's twin brother. Others thought that he was mentally abnormal and treated him like a fool. His wife also held on to this and often had an affair with her lover without any sense of propriety. She gave birth to a son and a daughter for her lover. Hua Yuan was cowardly and did not know how to resist. But after he lost his mind, Hua Yuan, who claimed to be his elder brother, was a person who would seek revenge for the smallest grievance. He was cruel and cunning. Yangtze could not help but shiver. Could it be that he was really Hua Yuan's elder brother who possessed him? Wei Ci shook his head and said seriously, "Ghosts and gods cannot be trusted. We must believe in science. Believe in the Lord." Yangtze looked at him strangely. Why did this sentence come out of the mouth of a charlatan? Why did it sound so awkward? Yangtze was confused. If it was not the younger brother who possessed him, how could it be explained that there were two completely different Hua Yuan after he lost his mind? One was cowardly, dejected, and bullied. His wife and her lover cheated on him countless times and gave him a pair of cheap children, making him a cheap father for many years. Such a great shame and humiliation, not to mention Hua Yuan, who was born in an aristocratic family. Any child beggar would not be able to tolerate it. The other one would seek revenge for the smallest grievance, cruel and cunning. He used the power of the barbarians to kill his wife and her lover, and also killed the two children who were with him every day. Don't forget that Hua Yuan also set up a series of plans. He stole the grain stored in Chunzhou from Yuan Xin, deceived Nie Sun, and tricked Huangsong. Yangtze was still thinking about the plot. Han Yu and the others looked at Wei Ci with a strange expression. Wei Ci's story was too detailed. It sounded more like a story to them. Pitiful sigh. Lost his mind? Maybe he has two personalities? I didn't expect Hua Yuan to be a psychopath. Lao Ciji Lianmeng. This is very likely. Samiran said that Hua Yuan went crazy after his parents died. His uncle and aunt, who had taken away his family's wealth, harbored evil intentions towards Hua Yuan. They even wanted to raise Hua Yuan to become a cripple. Hua Yuan was young and faced with a hostile external environment. Maybe he split his second personality because of this. This personality claimed to be Hua Yuan's biological brother who died young. Hua Yuan imagined that his elder brother would protect him. So the second personality was completely different from the first one. He evolved from a little sheep to a man-eating flower. Tudu Faccio. From a little sheep to a man-eating flower. This metaphor is amazing. I double-clicked 666 for you. Jiang Pengji said, "As far as I know, this kind of insanity is extremely difficult to cure. It will worsen over time." Chapter 1292. Some of the patients with multiple personalities were harmless, but some of them were very aggressive and aggressive. She had once carried out a mission to capture a freak with 36 personalities. Each of the 36 personalities had a strong tendency to be antisocial and violent. They committed serial crimes and had a great impact on society. Her superiors had issued hunting missions many times. The genetic warriors before Jiang Pengji had all failed miserably. They were killed instead. That guy had also come out of the genetic warrior training camp and was one of the best in that batch. His combat ability was not low and he was extremely dangerous. Each of the 36 personalities was the best of the best. Their disguise skills were flawless. Many genetic warriors did not even know how they died. Several people died in a row. The mission finally fell on Jiang Pengji. Even she was almost deceived. Of course, Jiang Pengji came back alive. She successfully killed the senior with multiple personalities and was admitted to the military hospital for a long time. Further deterioration? Yangtze asked curiously, "How so?" Jiang Pengji smiled and said, "For example, he lost his mind one day and woke up claiming that he was Yangtze." Yangtze shuddered. Was it fun to scare him? He subconsciously looked at Jiang Nongqin from the corner of his eye. He saw the heartless woman looking at him suspiciously. For all, he could not live like this anymore. If he had been NTR by someone else, he would have killed the other party. However, the person who cuckolded him was his lord, and she was a woman. He felt so wrong that he could not speak. How is this deterioration? Could it be that my soul will leave my body and possess him? Yang Si curled his lips gloomily. Zixiao said that ghosts and gods can't be trusted. Jiang Pengji explained. When he lost his mind, he became another person that he imagined. For example, Hua Yuan's elder brother. This is also someone that Hua Yuan subconsciously imagined when he was bullied and could not resist. Yang Si felt that her explanation was novel and interesting. It seemed to be easier to accept than the so-called possession of the soul of his deceased brother. Yang Si said, "My lord, do you mean that as time goes by, Hua Yuan may imagine himself as someone else?" Jiang Pengji nodded. Yes. After all, it was ancient times. Without targeted medication and medical conditions, it was difficult to cure Hua Yuan's dual personality. Little did he know that Jiang Pengji's words had come true. Hua Yuan had indeed split into other personalities. Yang Si asked curiously, "Zixiao, how do you know so much?" From the looks of it, even Hua Yuan's lover doesn't know him as well as you do. As soon as he finished speaking, Jiang Pengji glared at Yang Si. "Do you know how to talk? Who is Wei Si's lover?" Her frog was slowly simmering in her pot. How could it jump into someone else's pot? Yang Si. Even so, Yang Si's words still voiced everyone's confusion. Wei Si's understanding of Hua Yuan was too detailed. Wei Si dodged the question expressionlessly. "I calculated with my fingers and observed the stars at night." Yang Si could not help but complain. Can your reason be any more perfunctory? Who was the one who told him that ghosts and gods couldn't be trusted? Turning around and slapping his own face, "Wei Zixiao, you sure are capable." Wei Si argued with him and said, "Yes." Yang Si, Han Yu shook his head. He and Wei Si had known each other for many years. There was indeed something mysterious about Wei Si that others could not fathom. Since the Lord did not ask further, it was obviously harmless. She could just pretend to be deaf and dumb. On the contrary, Yang Si liked to be abused. Even though he knew that there was no result from asking, he still persisted. Jiang Pengji excused a meeting with the excuse that she was tired. Wei Si was caught up by Yang Si as soon as he left the tent. He said wickedly, "Zixiao, why don't you write a novel about Hua Yuan using the name of Layman Zaiki? It will definitely cause a sensation." Wei Si said, "Are you trying to piss him off?" He was so mischievous. Yang Si said, "After listening to this novel, my heart is itching. I always feel that it's not enough." For a novel, after reading a novel, one always felt that it was fresh and wanted to find a similar type to read again to satisfy the need. Wei Si was moved but refused. No matter what, he and Hua Yuan had worked together before. It was too wicked to bully an old colleague like this. Wei Si washed up and was about to rest when a figure sneaked in quietly. When he looked closely, it turned out to be the Lord. "Lord, you are relying on her good martial arts skills. The Lord always liked to visit her at night." Jiang Pengji said with a hint of jealousy, "About that Hua Yuan, were you familiar with him before?" She was not so familiar with the person who slept beside her. Wei Si's expression wavered a little, and he said slightly unnaturally, "After all, we worked together before." Jiang Pengji half leaned on him. "Zixiao, I'm sad. You actually have something on your mind for me. Did you really not have an affair with Hua Yuan?" Wei Si smiled bitterly and said, "We are both men. The friendship between gentlemen is as indifferent as water. Our relationship is completely different from yours." Although he was not proficient in sweet nothings, Wei Si knew how to pacify the person in front of him. Wei Si did not deliberately hide it. It was just that he did not want others to know about the secret, especially the person in front of him. "If my lord really wants to know, what's the harm in telling me?" Wei Si said, "I treated him like a gentleman's best friend, but he didn't think so." Hua Yuan's madness became more and more serious. One day, after his illness broke out, he claimed to be Hua Yuan's deceased wife. This woman was dissolute and liked young and beautiful scholars. At that time, I was in the prime of my life, and my looks were not bad. She often harassed me and refused to give up. I could not stand her harassment. In the face of workplace harassment, Wei Si righteously chose to say no. Hua Yuan's looks were not bad, but he was dressed in colorful women's clothing and wore scary makeup. Even ghosts would be scared to tears by him. It was because of this that Wei Si started to investigate Hua Yuan's past. Coincidentally, the first personality, Hua Yuan, woke up one day. Wei Si used some means to dig out a lot of inside information from him. He pieced this scattered information together into a complete intelligence report. If possible, Wei Si did not want to know more about Hua Yuan. This person was really evil and strange. Jiang Pengji said angrily, "He's so shameless." That's all in the past. Let's not talk about it. Wei Si sighed and said, "At the end of the day, he was just a pitiful person." After Hua Yuan split into elder brother and deceased wife, he also split into his deceased parents and his deceased wife's lover, who had cheated on him. A good counselor had gone crazy. Every time he thought of this, Wei Si could not help but sigh. If this person's temperament was normal, he would definitely have a place in this chaotic world. Unfortunately, Wei Si shook his head regretfully. In his previous life, Hua Yuan died a tragic death. He could not bear to see his end. This person coveted you and harassed you. Jiang Pengji said, "You still sympathize with him?" "After all, we know each other," Wei Si said. Jiang Pengji said, "Speaking of which, I seem to have been coveting Zi Xiao and harassing him. Do you hate me?" Chapter 1293. Willing to endure hardship. Jiang Pengji's thin lips curled up slightly. Before Wei Si could react, she hooked her right hand around the back of his neck, leaned forward, and pressed a kiss on his lips. "Zi Xiao is really sweet." She smacked her lips, looking like she was reminiscing. Wei Si's ears heated up, and his cheeks flushed red. Even though Wei Si had the experience of his previous life, he was still conservative and introverted. In terms of shamelessness, how could he be Jiang Pengji's opponent? The person in front of him was his nemesis. It was so in his previous life, and it was so in this life. She could defeat him without doing anything. "My lord." Wei Si reached out and stabilized her body. He said warmly, "It's getting late. Let's go back and rest first." Jiang Pengji leaned close to his ear. Her warm and moist air hit the base of his ear, causing him to palpitate and tremble. It made him lose control of his mind. "Zi Xiao, your surname was Lu in your previous life, right?" Wei Si frowned in surprise and said seriously, "Of course not. Why does my lord have such a question?" "I suspect that your name was Lu Xiaohui in your previous life." Jiang Pengji teased him with a smile. "If you were an ordinary man, you wouldn't be able to sit still by now." Could it be that her boyfriend power was at its maximum, causing the two of them to take the opposite roles? Should she take the initiative to overwhelm him? It wasn't that she hadn't tried before, but Wei Si's attitude was very resistant. She also abided by the federal law that she couldn't use force on others without permission. Wei Si smiled bitterly. "This is the military camp. Are you going to indulge in sensual pleasures here?" Jiang Pengji was startled. That really wouldn't do. As the lord, she had to set an example and firmly abide by the military rules of the military camp. She couldn't violate any of them, let alone indulge in sensual pleasures. She rolled her eyes and asked, "It's fine as long as we're not in the military camp?" Wei Si smiled bitterly again. The candlelight in the tent swayed. The orange light reflected in his eyes. They looked warm and deep, as if they contained stars. "That won't do. It's not suitable for my lord now." He paused and looked a little embarrassed. "It's not suitable for pregnancy." Jiang Pengji was stunned. She didn't expect Wei Si to reject her repeatedly for this reason. She thought it was because he was naturally shy. The two of them looked at each other for a while. Wei Si seemed to have lost all hope and said, "The world is in chaos and the situation is unstable. If my lord is not careful and becomes pregnant, it will be very inconvenient and the risk will increase. A woman's pregnancy is extremely dangerous. if she is careless and falls into someone else's trap. Wei Si's medical skills were not bad. In his previous life, he had spent a lot of effort to specialize in female gynecology. For stability, he had also learned how to deliver babies. It wasn't that he didn't trust others, but that a woman's pregnancy took 10 months to give birth, so she was especially vulnerable to external harm. Wei Si could not afford to gamble at all. Jiang Pengji scratched her cheek awkwardly with her index finger. She had never thought about it. She did not want to talk about contraceptives in ancient times. In order to ease the awkward atmosphere, she muttered, Zixiao is really confident in himself. Who didn't know that Wei Si's body was cold because of his childhood experiences? When it came to men, once the word body cold was attached to it, outsiders would subconsciously think that they were inferior to normal men in terms of fertility. Even if their bodies could be nurtured well, their yang energy would not be as abundant as others. Even if Wei Si had great self-restraint, he almost broke down when he heard his lord's words. My lord, no matter how small the possibility is, it doesn't mean that it won't happen. You can't take the risk. Wei Si had been nursing his body for a long time in this life. His condition was definitely much better than in his previous life. He had a son and a daughter in his previous life, so naturally, he wouldn't be without any gains in this life. In addition, the two of them were a few years younger than they were in their previous lives. It was reasonable to say that it was easier for a young and healthy body to conceive. Don't you know the technique of Qi Huang? Jiang Pengji said, feeling wronged. I've learned it for practical use. Wei Si was speechless for a long while. With a red face, he squeezed out a sentence with difficulty. Every medicine is poisonous. A woman's body is different from a man's. Even the slightest damage would be difficult to heal, not to mention the issue of having children. It's fine if you're compassionate, but this method isn't foolproof. If you're not careful and you get pregnant, the fetus you give birth to might be born with congenital deficiencies. Jiang Pengji was speechless. How infuriating. Jiang Pengji's face was as black as ink. Wei Si hesitated for a while. Then he plucked up his courage and stretched out his hand to comfort her back. The more he behaved like this, the angrier Jiang Pengji became. She pushed him down and bit him a few times. Beads of blood appeared on the flesh near his collarbone. Wei Si was in so much pain that he drew in a breath of cold air. The pain overwhelmed the lust in his body. He could only smile bitterly and pat her on the back, pacifying her. Jiang Pengji was on fire. He was in front of her, yet he couldn't eat her. He was forced to be a sadhu. She smiled bitterly and said, This is probably self-immolation. Wei Si didn't dare to interrupt. Instead, he hugged her in silence to calm the burning fire in his heart. His lord wasn't feeling well, but he was actually having a hard time too. Jiang Pengji hugged Wei Si and ate his tofu for a while. She quietly returned to the main tent. I'm going to rest. Don't disturb me if there's nothing important. She instructed the soldiers who were guarding the main tent. She went to her bedroom in the tent and opened the system store that she hadn't opened for many years. As she flipped through the pages, her face slowly darkened. The pressure surrounding her became even lower. Ordinary genetically modified rice, clean tap water, iodized salt, salt without iodized salt, soil with medium fertility, dry firewood, soybean oil, vegetable oil, sauces, aged vinegar, stir-fried green tea leaves, snakeskin bags, nail knives, ordinary wound medicine. What kind of lousy things were sold in the system store? After flipping through a few pages, Jiang Pengji was so angry that she rushed to the front of the system. The two systems were so scared that they trembled. You call yourselves systems. This is called the system store? Don't you have any idea what's going on? You don't even have a BYT. You can't even compare to a snack store. You're so useless. You might as well die. As the trash in the system, don't you think it's too embarrassing for you to live? She vented all her anger on the system. The two systems were so scared that they were dumbfounded. You're crazy. System number 2 retorted angrily. Who said that the system store must sell BYT? What was wrong with them? She had left them hanging for so many years. The pitiful pair of systems had to eat the energy she fed them regularly every day to survive. They felt wronged, even if they didn't eat their fill or starve to death. It was not easy for them to say a few words, but this crazy woman came up and scolded them. Isn't the bed the battlefield of the live streaming system? Don't you think this thing should exist? Jiang Pengji mocked and ridiculed them. As systems, you're so unprofessional. You even want to trick the host into working for you. You deserve to be imprisoned here. Trash. The two systems received critical damage. Damn it, it was great to have the ability to tear the system apart. A soldier would rather be killed than humiliated. Chapter 1294. Bad news from the front line? The next day, Hanyu was keenly aware that his lord was very angry. Her aura was even gloomier than before. Thinking about it, the only answer he could think of was bad news from the front line. No, if there was bad news from the front line, my lord would have summoned us overnight. Yangxi leaned close to him and whispered, "My lord has passed the age of 20. In other words, she has grown up. As an adult, there are always a few days when things go wrong." Yangxi smiled mysteriously and patted Hanyu's shoulder. Han Wenbin joined too late to notice some clues. Hanyu was about to correct him that 20 was used to describe a man and that a woman should be described as young, but he suddenly realized something. "You mean?" Hanyu's face turned gloomy and he scolded, "Yang Jingrong, how dare you lie about my lord? It's not something that can't be said. Sages are also human beings." Yangxi crossed his arms in front of his chest and said, "Why can't sages talk about things that they can't avoid? Without this, how can the bloodline continue? If you don't say it, who will know that I said it?" Hanyu was so angry that he almost laughed. He said, "My lord is a woman after all. Isn't it blasphemous to my lord's reputation by saying such things?" Yangxi was stunned for a moment and said embarrassedly, "Didn't I forget? I can only blame my lord for being too heroic and forgetting about this." Hanyu was speechless. He wanted to strangle this scoundrel. Hanyu was exasperated and said, "This is related to my lord's reputation. How can you talk nonsense?" It was not easy to be a female lord. Yangxi's attitude was so frivolous. If it was spread out, it would be extremely disadvantageous to my lord. Yangxi couldn't defeat Hanyu, so he could only listen to the scolding with his head down. After all, Hanyu was his senior brother, so he endured it. When Hanyu finished scolding him, Yangxi turned to Jiang Nongqin for comfort. Jiang Nongqin said, "Military advisor Han is thoughtful. You are indeed in the wrong. There is nothing to feel wronged about. My lord's reputation is the most important." Yangxi was speechless. What a heartless woman. Jiang Pengji was very angry, but there were many places for her to vent her anger during the war. Her morale was high, and her soldiers were also encouraged. They looked like they were ready to perish together with the enemy at any time. The entire army did not look dispirited at all. The haze of losing Hu County and Mound River County had been swept away. This was something new. Jiang Pengji gathered everyone for a meeting. A huge sand table was placed in the center of the tent, and the mountains, rivers, and rivers could be seen on it. Jiang Pengji glanced at the location of Zhanghe County, which was marked with Huangsong's label, and cursed in her mother tongue. Although she spoke softly, many people heard her, but they could not understand her. They couldn't understand it, but the viewers in the live stream knew what it meant. Jiang Pengji had been streaming for almost 10 years. Even if she did not deliberately speak in her mother tongue, she would still occasionally reveal a few words. In the live stream room, Salted Fish had been gathering material for years and barely managed to translate a few pronunciations. Lao Cg Lianmeng. The host has been very irritable lately. Is it because of Bogeo? Jiang Pengji usually restrained herself and avoided using her mother tongue as much as possible, except for one situation, when he was extremely irritable. Under such circumstances, other than cursing, there was no other meaning to using one's mother tongue. Guai Kai Guo Fengxiu, the streamer is going to win. Huangsong shouldn't have made her so angry, right? She should be scolding the local forces in Hu County for betraying her. I remember that the streamer did not touch them because she cared about Lu Shi's reputation, who knew that they would take advantage of the streamer's serious illness to betray her. Fortunately, Jiang Pengji was pretending to be sick. If she was really sick, they would have done this, and Hu County would have been completely lost. Hu County had a very important strategic significance. If the provisions in Hu County were taken away by Huang Song, he would not have to worry about food this winter. On the contrary, Jiang Pengji's side would be trapped. Even if it was freezing cold, Huang Song could still gather his troops to attack Guangzhou. Jiang Pengji might not be able to defend her side. Thinking of this, it was reasonable for Jiang Pengji to curse the ingrates in Hu County. Little did she know, Jiang Pengji changed the topic and said with a burning gaze, "It's getting cold. Let's send Bogeo on his way." Moyu Guangxi, the weather is getting cold and yellow. Guagugu, did you see that? That's my brain. Pepsi Cola, the person above is presumptuous. That's my brain. Qian Yu Man, isn't the brain above Coca-Cola? The idle people still did not change the topic, but Han Yu and the others were very reliable. The Sanshan Valley is not a place that is easy to defend and difficult to attack. If Huang Song attacks it with his troops, General Luo and the others will not be able to defend it for more than a few days. Han Yu said with a serious expression, "I asked General Qin Gong to send troops to sneak attack the rear of Huang Song's main force to restrain their troops, but it can only delay them for a while." Jiang Pengji said, "I also know that the Sanshan Valley is not a strategic pass. Luo Yu's troops will not be able to defend it. Therefore, we need to end the battle quickly without delay." Looking at the time, Bogeo should have received the news from Qinzhou. He will not sit still. He will either give up Hu County and Zhangyi County and retreat with his troops, or he will go all out and attack the Sanshan Valley and seize the whole of Hu County. Hu County was a hot potato. The terrain also made it easy to attack and difficult to defend. The whole of Hu County only had one line of defense, and they had to send many troops to defend it. However, the ingrates in Hu County were courting death. They cooperated with the mole Huang Song and broke the line of defense in Hu County. Han Yu said, "The value of Qinzhou is far less than Hu County. Huang Song will not give up the good situation for Qinzhou." In other words, the possibility of Huang Song leading troops to attack the Sanshan Valley was much higher than the former. If that was the case, Jiang Pengji would definitely send troops to stop Huang Song. She could accept losing the whole of Hu County, but she was afraid that the tens of thousands of elite troops sent to Hu County would also be lost. However, a quick battle was not something that could be won just by leading troops. They needed to think carefully about how to send troops and how to set up the layout. Everyone frowned and discussed for more than 2 hours before they finalized the final plan of attack. After the meeting ended, Jiang Pengji added, "We will pacify the 5 countries within 7 years. Bogeo is a force that we must destroy." Han Yu frowned. He did not want his lord to bite off more than she could chew. He hesitated and said, "This year we can conquer Huang Song and Dongqing will basically be unified, but the other 4 countries," Jiang Pengji snorted. "Can't we destroy a group of thieves with the strength of a country?" Dongqing, Xichang, Nansheng, Beiyuan, and Zhongzhou. The 5 countries were basically divided. Although Dongqing would not be the first to be in chaos, it would be the first to be unified. With all the troops in the country under her control, she did not believe that she could not defeat the neighboring countries that were divided. It was the same principle as making money to start a business. Starting a business was the most difficult to earn $1 million. Making another $1 million was much easier than starting a business from scratch. She spent nearly 7 years to unify Dongqing. Couldn't she destroy the other 4 countries in the remaining 7 years? Han Yu looked calm on the surface, but in fact his blood was boiling. He had been working for Jiang Pengji for a while. Except for the conversation that persuaded her to surrender, she had never revealed her ambition to invade the other 4 countries. Now she said that she would destroy the other 4 countries within 7 years. Even a rational person like Han Yu could not help but be excited. Chapter 1295. Who didn't know how to brag? But to be able to turn your bragging into reality, that was the real deal. Jiang Pengji had made a bold promise. This year, she would defeat Huang Song. In 7 years, she would pacify the 4 countries. Naturally, she had to put in the corresponding effort. At the moment, the most important thing was to send troops to intercept Huang Song's main force and prevent them from entering the Sanshan Valley. If Hu County was saved, the next battle would be easier. Not only did Jiang Pengji and the others understand this, but Huang Song's people were also well aware of it. However, Jiang Pengji was destined to be Huang Song's nemesis. Before he could recover from the joy of breaking through Hu County's defense line and taking over Zhangyi County, a few pieces of news came from the rear. It struck him like a bolt from the blue. Almost all of his rationality was shattered. Yuan Xin almost killed the military counselor Nie Sun in front of the battle. Yuan Xin easily believed Hua Yuan's suggestion and used the strategy of strengthening the defense and clearing the field. As a result, the grain stored in Qinzhou's granary was stolen by Hua Yuan. Yuan Xin was drunk and violent. He wanted to kill an assistant general who violated military orders. The assistant general was so bold that he conspired with another assistant general to kill Yuan Xin. Qinzhou is in dire need of rations. The military counselor Nie Sun reorganized the troops and stopped the enemy in Sangzhou. 4 pieces of news in a row blew Huang Song's mind away. That was not the point. The point was that the 4 pieces of news did not happen at the same time. What did this mean? It meant that someone had deliberately blocked and suppressed the news from the rear. They were deceiving everyone and causing Huang Song to be unable to know the situation of the battle immediately. Huang Song suppressed his surging anger. Fortunately, Yuan Xin was dead. If he hadn't died, Huang Song would have drawn his sword and slashed him. He looked at the messenger with a gloomy expression and asked in a hoarse voice, "Who sent you to deliver this news?" The messenger replied, "Military counselor Nie sent me to deliver the news to the Lord as soon as possible." Huang Song asked again, "When did military counselor Nie get injured?" The messenger replied, "About a month and a half ago." Huang Song asked again, "When did General Yuan Xin die? When did Qinzhou's rations get cheated?" The messenger was sweating profusely. The rations got cheated half a month after military counselor Nie got injured. 10 days later, General Yuan Xin was assassinated. Huang Song was furious. The veins on his forehead were bulging. His eyes were filled with horror. It would only take 10 days to get here from the front line in Qinzhou. Why is the news delayed for 40 to 50 days? Huang Song's anger could not be quelled, and the messenger could only bear the impact of his anger head-on. He was so frightened that he trembled all over, not daring to interrupt. The messenger said, This is because General Yuan Xin ordered." He was like a puncture balloon. His anger suddenly dropped from the highest point to the lowest point, and there was a dejected expression between his brows. Huang Song really regretted it now, so much so that his intestines turned green. He said angrily, "I thought he was sincerely remorseful to Qingyun. That's why I gave him a second chance to guard the rear of Qinzhou. I didn't expect him to be so unrepentant. He did it to Nie Sun and Yuan Xin didn't get along. Even if he did, the two of them wouldn't be able to reconcile. Nie Sun and Yuan Xin didn't get along. Even if he did, the two of them wouldn't be able to reach a peaceful ending." His words had come true. Huang Song, on the other hand, had no choice but to give Yuan Xian some face, and took out Yuan Xian that he had hidden away. It wasn't because Huang Song was a father figure. It was because Yuan Xian's youngest son was shot by a stray arrow to protect Huang Song and died. Huang Song remembered this kindness. He wasn't a heartless person. He always remembered Yuan Xian's kindness, so he took good care of Yuan Xian. In the end, alas, he was caught in his own trap. If he had listened to Feng Zhu, Cheng Jing, and the others, and kept Yuan Xian hidden or separated, he wouldn't be in this situation. Huang Song knew that Yuan Xian was taking advantage of his guilt and his status as his uncle. No one could suppress him except for a few people. But so what? He couldn't just let Yuan Xian go or abandon him just because he liked to target Nie Sun. Before the incident in Qinzhou, Yuan Xian's biggest mistakes were limited to targeting Nie Sun, snitching on him behind his back, and destroying internal unity. Huang Song would at most freeze Yuan Xin for a period of time as punishment. After the incident, he would still use it. Unexpectedly, Yuan Xin didn't say a word and caused big trouble. Not only did he hurt Nie Sun, but he also suppressed the news. One wrong step led to many wrong steps. In the end, Hua Yuan of unknown origin took away the food in Qinzhou. Huang Song told everyone in the tent with a serious face. Everyone was shocked. They didn't expect Yuan Xin to be so bold. Cheng Jing rubbed his eyebrows. Yuan Xin turned the advantage he had created with great difficulty into a disadvantage. He was really a capable person. He was dead, but the lord had to clean up the mess because of his stupidity. Cheng Jing frowned and thought. A counselor in Huang Song's tent came out and cupped his hands. My lord, General Yuan Xin is already dead. It's useless to argue about his mistakes now. The most important thing now is to solve the urgent situation. Qinzhou doesn't have enough troops and supplies. Counselor Nie is injured. We don't know how long he can defend. My lord, please make a decision as soon as possible. Should we send troops back to help Qinzhou or abandon it? The counselor's voice trailed off. If they didn't care about Qinzhou, as long as the enemy used the strategy of besieging them, Qinzhou would be finished even if they didn't do anything. Don't forget, there were nearly 1 million ordinary people in Qinzhou. There was still surplus food in the military camp for some time, but millions of people also needed to eat. Not every family had food reserves, and even if they did, there wouldn't be a lot. Many people had to go to the rice merchants regularly to buy rice. The rice merchants bought part of the rice from the people and the other part from the grain stores in the important towns. The rice bought by the grain stores was usually old rice that had been stored for a year or 2 or 3 years. The price was lower than new rice. It was good enough that the people had something to eat. Why would they be picky about whether the rice was new or old? Yuan Xin had moved all the food from the grain stores. How could they make up for this gap? There was another meaning in the counselor's words. If Huang Song chose to go back to help Qinzhou, he would have to face a food shortage of millions of Dawn and the people who lacked food. It was better to abandon it. Abandoning Qinzhou also meant abandoning Nie Sun and the tens of thousands of soldiers stationed there. What should he do? How should he choose? Huang Song's heart wavered. He was like a blind man standing on the edge of a cliff. In front of him was a cliff, and behind him was a fierce tiger. My lord, it's not time to delay. My lord, please make a decision quickly. Everyone tried to persuade him. Huang Song looked at Cheng Jing, asking him what he should choose. Cheng Jing was silent for a while, then said in a low voice, My lord, please think of the big picture. Chapter 1296. Everyone was well aware of Huang Song's choice. Cheng Jing left the main tent with a heavy heart and secretly found the messenger to ask. He felt that something was wrong about the incident in Qinzhou. Yuan Xin had a bad temper for a long time, but he had to be killed at such a critical juncture. The messenger trembled with fear and did not dare to look directly at Cheng Jing. He answered whatever Cheng Jing asked. Have you investigated Hua Yuan's background? Cheng Jing asked in a low voice. Is it possible that he was sent by Wanzhou? Huang Song and Jiang Pengji were in a heated battle. It was too much of a coincidence that Hua Yuan jumped out and swindled millions of Dawn of grain. When General Yuan Xin was alive, he had sent men to pursue the stolen rations. Although they didn't manage to catch the culprit, according to intelligence, Hua Yuan was a citizen of Nanxing. This batch of rations was also transported to the south by water. Military advisor Nie investigated it carefully. It was most likely not sent by Wanzhou. Cheng Jing frowned slightly and sighed. That's true. If it was Wanzhou's doing, it would have been publicized long ago. Sent south by water? Could it be Nanxing's power? Yang Tao and Jiang Pengji had formed an alliance. Yang Tao could indeed help Jiang Pengji. Cheng Jing would never have guessed that Hua Yuan was not Yang Tao's subordinate, but Enchui's. Enchui's reputation in Dongqing was very low. It was normal for Cheng Jing to not think of him. He asked again, How is military advisor Nie? Can you take it? Nie Sun was a very perceptive person. He should know what would happen to him if the news reached the front lines. Huang Song would definitely abandon Qinzhou. The messenger told the truth. Nie Sun had recuperated for more than a month before he could barely walk. Logically speaking, he still needed to rest, but Yuan Xin had died at such a critical juncture. If Nie Sun did not stand up to take charge, how could the soldiers in Qinzhou resist the ferocious enemy? After Cheng Jing heard this, his brows did not relax. Instead, they furrowed even more, leaving deep red wrinkles. Military advisor Nie was injured so badly. If he had not seen it with his own eyes, Cheng Jing would not have imagined how severe the injury was. The messenger said, military advisor stayed up for several nights before he was out of danger. He woke up for a while and wrote a will to his wife and daughter. If he was not injured to the point of death, who would write a will to curse him? Cheng Jing said, Will, do you know what it says? The messenger shook his head. He was just a lowly soldier. How could he be qualified to know what was written in the letter? However, General Yuanxin read the contents of the letter before he died. Not long after the letter reached the hands of Counselor Nie's wife and daughter, they led their men north. North? Suddenly, Cheng Jing understood something. He could roughly guess the contents of the will. It was most likely an order for his wife and daughter to go north and seek refuge with the Yu clan. He asked, Why didn't you tell the Lord about this? The messenger was stunned and said in astonishment, Counselor Nie didn't say anything. Cheng Jing lowered his eyelids to hide the complex emotions that flashed across his eyes. Nie Sun had sent someone to report, but he had left out the detail that he had written a will to his wife and daughter. Was he afraid that the Lord would pursue and suspect him? When he thought of this, Cheng Jing asked about the details of Yuan Xian's death in detail. The more he asked, the more shocked he was. Yuan Xian's death. I'm afraid it won't be simple. Even if the commoners were resentful, they would not be able to win against the Thais. Most of them did not have the courage to make a fuss, and could only swallow the bitter pill. That old man had not only carried his granddaughter's corpse to the military camp to make a fuss, but he had also been able to maintain his composure during the confrontation and speak clearly and methodically. He did not seem like a commoner, but more like someone had instructed him behind the scenes. Cheng Jing raised his hand to press his aching forehead and said in a low voice, You may leave. Be careful when you leave. Don't let anyone see that you've seen me. Cheng Jing wanted to hide it, but Huang Song was a suspicious person. He heard that Cheng Jing had privately summoned the messenger. This action attracted Huang Song's attention. He summoned the messenger to ask, What did the counselor ask? The messenger recalled carefully and told him everything. After hearing this, Huang Song's expression became a little gloomy. The messenger knelt down in fear and trembled, not even daring to breathe loudly. After a while, he waved his hand and said, Don't say anything that should or shouldn't be said. The messenger retreated with a puzzled face. The next day, Huang Song gathered everyone to discuss the matter of attacking the Three Mountains Valley. Cheng Jing keenly noticed that Huang Song was not as hesitant as the day before. This lowly general requests to join the battle. We will definitely attack the Three Mountains Valley within 3 days. There were many generals under Huang Song's command, but most of them were from the Yuan family. Only less than half of them were generals with different surnames. The one who requested to join the battle this time was Yuan Xin's eldest son. He took after his father in appearance, and was also a fierce and aggressive person when he was young. As soon as he finished speaking, Yuan Chong and a few other generals also stood up and requested to join the battle. The Three Mountains Valley was easy to attack, but difficult to defend. Even if the enemy had placed a large number of soldiers here, it would still be difficult to defend. This was a good opportunity to make a contribution. Huang Song was still disgusted by Yuan Xin's betrayal and did not want to see anyone related to Yuan Xin for the time being. He ignored Yuan Xin's eldest son and turned to Yuan Chong. Is Hung Shu confident? Yuan Chong secretly clenched his fists and took a deep breath. He said in a powerful voice, This lowly general is willing to make a military pledge. It seemed that he was very confident. Huang Song secretly nodded, feeling quite pleased. Yuan Chong was his younger brother and fan. The two of them had been good friends when they were young. Yuan Chong was much better than Yuan Xin. Yuan Xin's eldest son said discontentedly, Hung Shu is still young after all. This battle is of great importance. Please play it safe, my lord. Huang Song retorted expressionlessly, embarrassing Yuan Xin's eldest son. Yuan Chong led his troops into battle. The dark formation made the onlookers feel pressured. In the Three Mountains Valley, the war drums thundered. Luo Yu took a deep breath and wiped his weapon with a gloomy expression. It seemed that doing so could calm him down. Meng Hung and Cheng Yuan looked at the sand table with a solemn expression. This was not a good place to defend, but they had no other choice. The enemy had the geographical advantage, and they could only fight passively. Fight to the death. We would not take a step back. Luo Yu gripped the long saber in his hand tightly. The polished blade glowed with a cold white light. Meng Hung said, General Luo, defending to the death is not a good strategy. Even if we use all our men and supplies, defending for 5 days is the limit. The enemy had set up their formation. It was obvious that they would not rest until they were dead. If they fought the enemy to the death, the outcome would be total annihilation. Luo Yu said, We have already lost Zhanghe district. There is no retreat. If we lose the Three Mountains Valley, the entire Hu County will. Hung is aware of this. Meng Heng's indifferent eyes were as calm as an ancient well. But these tens of thousands of soldiers are elites that my lord has carefully nurtured. General wants them to defend the Three Mountains Valley to the death. This loss is far greater than losing Hu County. Luo Yu stood up abruptly. A hint of struggle flashed across his square face. What do you mean, military advisor? Meng Hung said, Retreat and abandon the valley. Retreat is the best plan. It was a loud bang. Luo Yu was so angry that he smashed the table beside him. Sawdust scattered all over the floor. Military advisor. Retreat and abandon the valley. How could Meng Hung say that? Wasn't this equivalent to handing over the entire Hu County to Huang Song? Chapter 1297. Luo Yu's eyebrows twitched. He said solemnly, Please elaborate. He must have been blind. He thought Meng Hung was a gentle and kind scholar. He didn't expect him to be so crazy and decisive. No wonder he was Meng Zhan's son. His ruthlessness was inherited, killing 1,000 enemies while sacrificing 800 men, perishing together. Meng Hung sneered. Luo Yu's heart skipped a beat. Huang Song attacked Hu County for the food after the autumn harvest. We can burn it. If we can't get it, Huang Song won't get it either. Luo Yu's eyelids twitched. Burn it. Burn his own food. Crazy? Meng Hung said, Not all of it. We're burning the fields within 100 miles of the Sanshan Valley. If the food was burned, what was the point of Huang Song's attack? He could just cry in Mound River County. Luo Yu looked at Meng Hung with shock in his eyes. His breathing was rapid and heavy, and his eyes were bloodshot, burning the crops within 100 miles of the fields. How could he bear to do it? In this era, people would sacrifice their lives for a meal. How could he do it? If you don't make a decision, you'll be in trouble. Meng Hung said coldly, General Luo, make a decision. Luo Yu squeezed the handle of the knife. His knuckles turned blue from a force. His bones were almost protruding out of his skin. It was obvious how much he was struggling. The choice Meng Hung gave Luo Yu was too difficult. No matter what he chose, Luo Yu couldn't bear to do it. Cheng Yuan held his breath and looked at the two with a complicated expression. Is there really no other way? Cheng Yuan helped Luo Yu speak his mind. Meng Hung said, Huang Song will attack the Sanshan Valley with all his strength. We can at most hold on for 5 days. That's at the cost of the lives of all the soldiers. My lord's army is restraining Huang Song's, but Huang Song is avoiding the battle. He'll use the terrain to delay them. It won't be a problem to stall for 10 days to half a month. By then, Hu County will be in Huang Song's hands. Is that what you want to see? The two were speechless. Luo Yu hung his head in pain. Meng Hung said, Sacrificing 100 miles of fields in exchange for the lives of tens of thousands of soldiers in half of Hu County. Isn't that worth it? Luo Yu said, Advisor, in 2 months, it will be the autumn harvest, Meng Hung said, but we're exhausted after persevering for 5 days. How can we last until the autumn harvest? Since ancient times, wars had only involved seizing other people's territory and food. Who would burn one's own food? After a while, Chung Yuan said, if news of the people burning a year's worth of hard work gets out. Meng Hung asked, isn't there a ready scapegoat? Luo Yu and Chung Yuan were both stunned, not knowing who Meng Hung was referring to. Some people worked with Huang Song from the inside for wealth and glory. Why didn't anyone burn the food and take the opportunity to surrender to Huang Song? Meng Hung said, anyway, there are a bunch of people who are about to die. It's not too much to add another crime to them. Let their deaths be more worthwhile. Both of them were silent. What was the reason for the arson? Anyone with a discerning eye would know that Huang Song attacked Hu County for the food. Which idiot would burn the food as a sign of allegiance? As if he could see the two's doubts, Meng Hung said, it's just burning the fertile fields near the Three-Mountain Valley. We can say that the burning of the fields is to distract our army and mislead us into sending troops to extinguish the fire. This will weaken the defending forces of the Three-Mountain Valley. It's good as long as it makes sense. There was no lack of fallacies and ordinary people who were brainwashed by them. As long as the majority of people believe in alcohol, a minority would naturally choose to remain silent. Has General Luo made a decision? Luo Yu looked dispirited and said in a hoarse voice, if we can survive this battle, I'll personally ask for forgiveness from the Lord. Not only did he fail to defend the territory that the Lord had given him, but he also escaped by burning his own fields. Such an incompetent and prodigal performance made Luo Yu want to find a hole to hide in and never come out again. Huang Song's army came in a menacing manner. They were very ferocious and did not give anyone a chance to breathe. The two armies fought from day to night with the Three Mountains Valley as the boundary. The gate of the pass was smashed by a giant tree once. If it were not for the timely use of dozens of saber carts to block it, they would not have been able to hold on for a day. Everyone was panic-stricken and did not dare to close their eyes at night, afraid that the enemy would take the opportunity to launch a sneak attack. Luo Yu transferred a few thousand soldiers to disguise themselves as ordinary guards and sneaked out of the Three Mountains Valley in the middle of the night. Because of the war, the people nearby had already packed their belongings and headed north to avoid disaster. The fertile fields were left unguarded, which made it convenient for them to move around. Huang Song and the others did not choose to attack at night. Instead, they let the army rest and build up their strength, because the battle situation during the day determined that the enemy was more nervous than they were and did not dare to sleep the whole night. If they didn't sleep for a whole night, the enemy's physical condition would naturally be inferior to theirs, and they would have the advantage the next day. Based on the current situation, they would be able to take down the Three Mountains Canyon in 3 to 4 days. No matter how strong the enemy was, they were still mortals. It was impossible for them to not sleep for a few days. In the middle of the night, a faint orange light lit up behind the Three Mountains Valley. At first, it was not obvious, and Huang Song and the others did not pay much attention to it. As time passed, the orange light gradually spread and dyed the dark sky with an orange edge. After 2 to 4 hours, Huang Song was woken up by someone. What happened? Huang Song finally managed to fall asleep. Just as he was sleeping soundly, he was woken up by the ruckus outside. He tightened his pajamas and raised his hand to rub his sleepy eyes. Master, something bad has happened. There's a fire. Fire? What fire? Huang Song's mind quivered. He mistakenly thought that the enemy had come to set a fire at night and was so scared that he was completely awake. He grabbed Yuan Chong's hand and asked, "Where's the fire?" Yuan Chong could not explain clearly, so he ran to the observation deck with Huang Song. There was a dazzling line of fire on the horizon in the direction of the Three Mountains Valley. What's that? Huang Song felt like he was dreaming. Why was the enemy's rear on fire? Yuan Chong said, "The enemy's rear is on fire." I don't know who said it. The two looked at each other. At this moment, The enemy's rear was on fire? Huang Song suddenly had the illusion that he was the chosen one. He looked at the fire in the distance and vaguely felt that something was wrong. Huang Song asked, "Where's the location of the fire?" Yuan Chong could not tell him the specifics and could only give him a rough location. Huang Song's mind flashed, and he was shocked. He quickly climbed down the observation deck. At this moment, Cheng Jing and the others also rushed over. Their faces were frighteningly gloomy. They checked the locations of the great universal geographical map and were shocked to find that all the locations of the fire were fertile fields. Such a big fire may not be extinguished in 3 to 5 days. They did not know how much grain that was about to ripen had been burned, but they knew that it was not a number they wanted to see. "They're crazy!" Huang Song's emotions suddenly exploded. He waved his hand and overturned the table. The bamboo slips and documents on the table scattered on the ground, and the table fell to the ground with a dull thud. In the Three Mountains Valley, Luo Yu looked in the direction of the fire and wiped his tears. Chapter 1298. Compared to the back-and-forth battle in Hu County, the Wanzhou battlefront seemed dull and boring. The person guarding the Wanzhou battlefront was Qiguan Rang. The commander was Fu Wang, and the troops he led were all elites. No matter what tricks Feng Zhu used to lure and mislead them, the entire army adopted the safest strategy. It wasn't that Qiguan Rang didn't want to change from defense to offense, but he had Wanzhou behind him. If Hu County fell, they would at most lose a year's harvest. Next year, they would have to tighten their belts. If Wanzhou was lost, then the battlefront would completely collapse. Qiguan Rang knew this, so he didn't dare to slack off. He often deduced the enemy's tactics late into the night, so busy that he even forgot where to put the feather fan in his hand. Yes, that's right. The feather fan that Qiguan Rang never left his hand all year round had finally lost the favor of the main wife. Suddenly hearing that Hu County had fallen, even Fu Wang, the commander, couldn't sit still. Qiguan Rang was still calm and unperturbed. "Isn't the advisor worried at all?" "Of course," Qiguan Rang said. "If all of Hu County falls into Huang Song's hands, not only will they get millions of dawn of new grain, but the tens of thousands of elites under the Lord's command will also be lost. However, if we lose Hu County, we still have a chance to win. If we lose Wanzhou, it'll be hard to turn things around." The land of Wanzhou was the culmination of 7 years of his lord's hard work. Hu County's greatest value lay in its grain. Qiguan Rang knew very well which of the two was more important. Fu Wang let out a sigh after hearing this. He put away all his anxiety and nervousness. He seemed to have calmed down, but the aura around him was slightly terrifying. As soon as Fu Wang thought of the local forces in Hu County rebelling against Huang Song, who had backstabbed them in their vitals, causing the defense line in Hu County to fall and the army to have to retreat to the Three Mountains Canyon, he was instantly enraged. He gritted his teeth and said, "If the people in Hu County hadn't..." Qiguan Rang frowned and looked at a spot on the sand table. He clicked his tongue. Maybe the Lord would be happy to see this. Fu Wang almost exploded in anger. How could the Lord be happy to see betrayal? The Lord seized the opportunity to clean up Chongzhou, but Hu County is not easy to deal with. Qiguan Rang's eyes were cold as he said meaningfully, "Now that someone is courting death, of course, she doesn't mind them being bolder. If they know their place, who would the Lord kill?" Fu Wang furrowed his brows. He had a feeling that Qiguan Rang was implying something. Although the general looked burly and honest on the surface, as if the general was all brawn and no brains, in reality, that was not the case. The scheming on the battlefield was no less than the fighting in the imperial court. A commander capable of commanding hundreds of thousands of soldiers in battle would not be a simple-minded person. Fu Wang probed, "Why you say so? Could it be that my lord already had the intention to get rid of those people?" If that was the case, Fu Wang was even more puzzled. Other than the stab this time, the forces in Hu Commandery have been very obedient the rest of the time. There is no reason for the Lord to want to kill them so early on. Qiguan Rang was startled for a moment, then smiled faintly. Perhaps. How can an outsider guess the Lord's thoughts? Fu Wang choked on his words. Qiguan Rang was pretending to be deaf and mute. Qiguan Rang obviously knew something but refused to say it. This made Fu Wang's heart itch, but Qiguan Rang was tight-lipped and refused to reveal anything. Qiguan Rang replied, "It's not a good thing to know too much." As soon as Fu Wang heard this, he knew that he should not continue to be curious. Even a cautious Qiguan Rang said so it must not be a small matter. He decisively changed the topic to his opponent, Feng Ju. If Qiguan Rang's steady style was a shield, then Feng Ju was a sharp spear, extremely aggressive and deceptive. Fu Wang occasionally lamented that Feng Ju had followed the wrong person to follow Huang's song. His temperament was more like the Lord's. If Huayu was not in Sangzhou, but here, it would be interesting for the brothers to fight. Qiguan Rang said, "My lord deliberately transferred Huayu to Sangzhou to avoid the brothers from killing each other." Fu Wang made a sound of surprise. "Aren't the brothers Chung Sun and Chung Yuan a warning?" Qiguan Rang said, "Old Master Feng Run is old and can't take the stimulation. Chung Sun's death caused Chung Chung to become seriously ill. Many famous doctors said that he could not hold on any longer. If the same situation happened again, if old Master Feng Run was also sick, he might not have the luck to recover." Fu Wang said, "If that's the case, no wonder the Lord transferred the troops to Hu Commandery and avoided Nyesun. Is it the same reason?" Qiguan Rang nodded. "It's rare for my lord to be so considerate." Fu Wang stretched and perked up. "The enemy hasn't moved for 2 days. It doesn't look normal." Feng Ju led troops to attack Wanzhou, but they were stopped by Fu Wang and Qiguan Rang. The two sides were in a stalemate. A while ago, the battle was quite fierce, but these 2 days, it had become uncharacteristically quiet. There must be a reason for this abnormality. Fu Wang felt that Feng Ju was definitely up to something. Qiguan Rang said, "If the enemy doesn't move, I won't move. As long as something doesn't happen in Wanzhou, what tricks can he play?" The main theme of the battlefront in Wanzhou was defense. They absolutely could not push the battlefield into Wanzhou. This was the bottom line that the Lord had told them. It was best if Feng Ju was willing to stop for a while. Qiguan Rang could take the time to make other arrangements. Reality proved that Feng Ju was a restless person. How could he waste his limited time on meaningless things? Fu Wang had a brainwave and said with a smile, "What if Feng Ju instigates the Feng family to defect?" "General Fu, do you know how long the Feng family has been around for?" Qiguan Rang secretly rolled his eyes and chuckled. "Feng Ju instigates the Feng family to change their stance. But the premise is that the Lord dies and Wanzhou and Hu County fall into Huang Song's hands. Only by achieving this premise can Feng Ju have a chance. The Feng family has gone through several dynasties and several troubled times. If they don't even have the ability to protect themselves, how could they have survived until now? The Feng family of Shangyang was not something that the upstarts in Hu County could compare to." Fu Wang asked, "What if Feng Ju forged a letter to force the Feng family?" Qiguan Rang said, "That's even more impossible. No matter how rebellious Feng Ju is, he won't be so cruel as to drag the entire Feng family into a situation of eternal damnation. You also know the Lord's temperament. She won't easily let go of those who betray her. No matter how stupid Feng Ju is, he won't do that. If he dares to do that, old Master Feng Ren will be the first to step forward and strike Feng Ju out of the family tree, or even kill family in the name of righteousness." Fu Wang nodded as he listened. Not long after the two of them ended this topic, they were slapped in the face. "Report, we've caught a suspicious spy." Fu Wang waved his hand and said, "Spy? Bring the person in." As soon as he finished speaking, 2 soldiers escorted a woman in a summer gown into the room. The woman struggled as she walked. Fu Wang said, "Is this a spy?" The woman looked to be about 27 or 28 years old. Her black hair was tied up in a woman's bun, revealing her clean neck and collarbone. Her figure was plump, and her skin was delicate and rosy, like a ripe peach. She was also very good-looking, and her eyes were charming and moving, as if they could suck in a person's soul. Fu Wang took a look and was stunned for a moment, but he came to his senses the next moment. Chapter 1299. One of the patrolling soldiers had been holding back his pee so much that he begged his colleagues to switch shifts and secretly went to a remote place to relieve himself. Just as he was feeling good, he saw this strange woman. She looked strange and attracted the attention of the soldier. Based on the principle that it was better to catch 1,000 wrong people than to let one go, the soldier reported the news. The woman was very strange. Anyone who met her eyes would be so mesmerized that they couldn't tell north from south. They would do whatever she said. The soldiers originally thought they had caught the wrong person, but seeing this strange situation, they had to catch the woman no matter what. After a lot of trouble, they finally caught the woman. Fu Wang sneered and looked at the uneasy deputy general. Wild fox, I think you guys have been dry for too long. Everything looks like a fairy. He had high standards. How could someone so ugly be called a fairy? Ignorant. The deputy general was embarrassed. He also knew that this woman didn't look like a spy, but she was indeed abnormal. He had even found evidence. General, this is the letter we received from this person. The deputy general handed it over. Seeing this, the woman's eyes widened and she struggled even more violently. This woman was stronger than an ordinary man. 2 adult soldiers couldn't hold her down at all. They needed another to subdue her. Fu Wang took the letter. There was still wax on it. He opened the wax and took out the letter inside. His fingers held the corner of the letter and shook it. After unfolding it, he read 10 lines at a glance. When Fu Wang read the letter, Qiguan Rang was squinting and yawning. He hadn't had much rest for several days and was easily sleepy during the day. General Fu, what's wrong? Fu Wang looked at the woman and handed the letter to Qiguan Rang in disbelief. He lowered his voice and said, Counselor, take a look at this. Qiguan Rang didn't understand. What's written on it? After reading it, Fu Wang took out the folded paper from the envelope. And this. Qiguan Rang knew at a glance that the paper was a detailed topographic map of Wanzhou, as well as the distribution of troops in various places. In this era, maps were not easy to draw. Detailed and accurate maps could even be kept as top secrets. The topographic map of Wanzhou was naturally the most important war secret. It wouldn't be easily revealed. The map in front of him was far more detailed than the maps Qiguan Rang knew. If it fell into the hands of the enemy, the consequences would be unimaginable. Apart from the map, there was also the letter. It was a letter from Feng Yin to Feng Ju. Who was Feng Gue? The current head of the Feng clan, Feng Ju's elder brother. Qiguan Rang had just said that it was impossible for the Feng family to be instigated by Feng Ju. Immediately after that, there was a spy carrying irrefutable evidence of collaboration with the enemy. What a slap in the face. Fu Wang looked at Qiguan Rang with a strange expression. Qiguan Rang frowned and read the letter over and over again. Where is he? Qiguan Rang asked. Fu Wang raised his hand and pointed at the woman. Here, but this woman's eyes are indeed a little strange. Counselor, you must be careful. Qiguan Rang took 2 steps forward. The woman lowered her head when he approached and did not struggle as violently as before. Looking at the woman, Qiguan Rang raised an eyebrow and lifted her chin, forcing her to lift her head. Fu Wang, incredible, incredible. Qiguan Rang's brows relaxed. He asked in surprise, It's you? The woman subconsciously shrank her shoulders, avoiding Qiguan Rang's direct gaze. Fu Wang asked, Do you know her? Could it be that this woman was an old flame of the counselor's? Qiguan Rang did not pay attention to Fu Wang's thoughts. We've met a few times, but I haven't seen her in recent years. There were a total of 4 maids close to the Lord. One was Lady Xuanmei, who had been betrothed to Xiaoyu by the Lord. The other was Jiang Xiaowei, who had also been the Lord's maid. The third was Lady Hui Jun, whom General Fu should be very familiar with. The fourth is the person in front of you, Lady Takshu. When Fu Wang joined Wanzhou, Takshu had already been ostracized by Jiang Pengji and was later sent to Chongzhou. Therefore, Fu Wang had never seen Takshu before. Fu Wang was surprised. She's the Lord's maid? Yes. I haven't heard any news of her in years. I didn't expect to see her here. But why? Even if Takshu was no longer the Lord's maid, the Lord would not neglect Takshu based on their previous relationship as a servant. Even if she was not rich, it would not be a problem for her to be content with a little bit of wealth. If Takshu betrayed the Lord, she would be betraying her master. Who would trust her? Chiguan Rang folded the letter and said lightly, "Keep this person in custody and let the Lord deal with her. It's not convenient for us to do anything." Fu Wang hesitantly pointed at the letter in Chiguan Rang's hand. "This woman is easy to deal with. Then this letter and map. If the Feng family betrays the Lord, Wanzhou will be the next Hu County. This is irrefutable evidence. If the evidence is proven to be real, will the Lord let the Feng family go?" Hearing Fu Wang's voice, Taksha became nervous. She held her breath and waited for Chiguan Rang's reaction. Chiguan Rang said, "How can we convict the Feng family based on a letter whose authenticity is unknown? Even if the letter is real, if we attack the Feng family now, won't we be forcing the Feng family to rebel in advance and forcing Huayu, who is at the front lines, to make a choice between the family and the Lord?" Fu Wang wanted to say something, but Chiguan Rang gestured for him to detain Takshu. "General Fu, we can't be too hasty." Chiguan Rang smiled. "Don't you think that Lady Takshu is really strange?" Fu Wang nodded. "She is indeed a little strange." Chiguan Rang said, "This matter involves too many people. It's better to suppress it first. This matter concerns the Feng family's position. We have to be more cautious." Chiguan Rang shook his head. "The Feng family is easy to deal with, but I'm afraid it will cause the Lord and the Old Master to fall out." Fu Wang was shocked. "The Lord and the Old Master. What does this have to do with them?" Chiguan Rang explained to him. Takshu was the Lord's maid in the early years, but she was personally chosen by the Old Master. The Lord sent Takshu to Chongzhou to send her back to the Old Master's side. Based on this relationship, does Takshu and the Feng family have anything to do with each other? They had nothing to do with each other. Even if the Feng family was really muddle-headed, the messenger should not have been Takshu. This person's relationship was too inexplicable. Fu Wang immediately understood and felt that things were getting tricky. Chiguan Rang thought about it and wrote a letter to Feng Gue, who was at the back of Wanzhou, briefly explaining the situation. No matter what, this matter could not be hidden from the Feng family. If the Feng family had been framed, Feng Gue would rush over to explain as soon as he found out. If it was not framed, the Feng family would not dare to act rashly for a while. Of course, the possibility of the Feng family being framed was almost 100% unless Feng Gue was kicked in the head by a donkey to betray them. At this moment, Feng Gue was responding to his father's call to send his two legitimate sons to the Golden Scale Academy. Unsurprisingly, the next generation of the Feng family would be handed over to one of these two children. This indirectly expressed the Feng family's attitude. You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.